with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, January 25th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Astra Taylor and Elizabeth Alvarez from the Debt Collective on the 100-day Biden debt Jubilee. Meanwhile, Republicans build a wall against COVID relief. The CDC director admits we have no idea how much coronavirus vaccine is in the United States. Joe Biden to impose a South African travel ban as reports show Moderna's vaccine less effective in fighting that particular strain. Still effective, just a little bit less. Chuck Schumer agrees to a 2-week delay of Trump's impeachment trial in the Senate. Meanwhile, new reports on just how many attempts Trump made to overthrow the election, including ousting acting attorney general. New report shows that U.S. intelligence is getting your smartphone data, and they're doing so by skirting around the need for warrants by simply buying it. Gavin Newsom to lift the stay-at-home orders in California. Chicago teachers stage a labor action and defy Chicago's reopening plan. Russian police detained thousands of people in rallies, or from rallies, I should say, across the country in a pro-Alexei Navalny protest. And lastly, Mar-a-Lago members are quitting the golf club because it's gotten a lot sadder since Donald Trump came back to live there. All this and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, thank you for joining us today. It is Monday. We are all back in studio, of course, COVID-safe studio. I am sitting across the studio with screens and protectors and filters all running from Emma Vigeland, which, of course, Emma, you don't take that personally, I hope.
No, I don't. I mean, I could. You could be claiming I'm some sort of diseased human being, but we also have a window open. You forgot about that other precaution.
We have a window open as well. We are just, we're playing it safe here always. We should tell you, I mean, we get regular tests and whatnot, but we still maintain this screening and this and that, particularly with the idea that the new mutation of the virus, the British one, is probably going to supposedly be dominant within 6 to 8 weeks in this country. And new reports out today about the South African strain, which apparently makes the Moderna vaccination somewhat less effective. However, it starts at 90 to 95%. So somewhat less effective, apparently, according to the scientists at this point, to the extent that they know, is still pretty effective. And they're talking about maybe testing out a third dosage of the vaccine But the real problem in this country, of course, is that there's been no infrastructure built to distribute vaccines or produce vaccines. And the Biden administration, that is their job number one.
100 shots in 100 days is the promise. Some people are saying that is too low of a bar. You're not going to hear me be soft on the Biden administration because that's not my job, but they were left zero infrastructure, an empty cupboard, if you will, from the Trump administration. And it seems like it might be a little difficult to build from scratch at this point, which is kind of what they're tasked to do.
I think so. I think also part of it is just simply to what extent there is a willingness to cut into the profits. Pfizer's going to be making billions of dollars of profits off this. All of the other entities that could be producing one. I mean, you could go to Johnson & Johnson and say, we know you're close to developing a vaccine, but however, stop, or at least be prepared to be backed up because we want your facilities to be producing the Pfizer vaccine. There is a story, too, about the AstraZeneca vaccine, and that there was an attempt to make it open source. I'm still reading into this, but they were convinced not to for perhaps, I don't know what reasons. And there's a very tough time getting this vaccine distributed. Poorer countries are not getting the vaccinations. And, of course, the problem here is that, aside from the sort of moral issues involved in it, but strictly from a public and world health perspective, the more you allow the coronavirus to develop and travel through different corners of the planet without any type of mitigation that a vaccine brings, the more opportunity there is for the virus to mutate and develop in such a way that the vaccinations do not protect us from it. So there is both a moral and just a sheer public policy reason why you want to make sure that the vaccine is widely distributed and available regardless of where you live. And
I mean, there's the point you make about how they could compel these other manufacturers to produce either the Moderna or Pfizer vaccine is a very good one. But this does not seem like the administration that's going to cut into big pharma's profits.
We'll see. The Defense Production Act will cut into some measure of profits in and of itself, because you're instructing them to do something that they haven't already done, and they usually just pursue
And you could
profits.
target smaller fish and ask those, not Johnson & Johnson, who's in the process of developing its own vaccine, hey, we need these facilities, for example.
I would just go for the biggest fish myself.
You would, but
yeah.
probably not.
No,
right, I would too.
Fair enough. All right, let's talk a little bit about the COVID relief. We have talked over the past couple of weeks, really, about the 2 tracks that are available to the Biden administration to do this. Actually, there's essentially 2 tracks, but there's variations of these 2 tracks. One is try and get it through the Senate under regular, or I should say 3 tracks. One is try and get it through the Senate with 10 votes, at least, from Republicans to clear the possible filibuster threshold. The other track, which is, I guess, a similar track in some respects. I don't even know how to characterize these tracks. The other potential tactic is to get rid of the filibuster and make it about 50 Democrats in the Senate plus Kamala Harris as the tie-breaking vote. The third mechanism is reconciliation. Reconciliation can only deal with things that directly implicate the U.S. budget, but that's a lot of things. Here is Bernie Sanders on with Dana Bash on CNN State of the Union. And he makes a very good point that sometimes context makes a difference. And the purpose in which you use certain tools is relevant as to whether it justifies using certain tools. Here is that clip.
Republicans have used the so-called reconciliation process before, like in 2017, to try to kill Obamacare. You accused them of abusing the process back then. You said, quote, the function of reconciliation is to adjust federal spending and revenue, not to enact major changes in policy. But you alluded to this. You are the chairman of the Budget Committee, or going to be. You are already talking about using this tactic for things like paid family and medical leave, for universal pre-K and childcare, for climate change, tuition-free college, eliminating student debt, and the $15 minimum wage. How is that not what you criticize Republicans for doing?
Well, the devil is in the details of what we want to do and when we want to do it and when we have to do it. What we are talking about, by the way, are two separate reconciliation packages. Number one, the emergency one right now.
Right.
Get direct checks, get those checks into people's pockets right now so they can feed their families. And make sure that people are not evicted from their homes. Make sure that states have the funds they need to get vaccines into people's homes. That's what we've got to do right now. And then as soon as that is done, we have to rebuild this economy. Unemployment is much, much too high. Wages are much, much too low. There are structural problems that we have ignored for years. Climate change is a reality.
And you're okay doing all of that through this process that you criticize Republicans for using? These are major policy changes.
These are major policy changes, but the devil is in the details. And I criticize Republicans, for using reconciliation to give tax breaks to billionaires, to create a situation where large profitable corporations now pay zero in federal income taxes. Yes, I did criticize them for that. And if they want to criticize me for helping to feed children who are hungry or senior citizens in this country who are isolated and alone and don't have enough food, they can criticize me. I think it's the appropriate step forward.
Well, the devil isn't even in the details. The devil is in
the top line, the top line of all of it.
Right.
It's really what he's saying is just the context. It's that reconciliation. I mean, I could even go deeper into the fact of the matter is that the 50 senators, in the event that they go through reconciliation, the 50 senators who vote on this reconciliation bill would represent far more people than were at 50 Republican
people.
Yes. I mean, aside from that, I mean, because presumably, right, the reconciliation it's rather undemocratic to use it to pass measures that benefit a very small segment of the population. That's really the issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I understand the role of asking that kind of question, but I mean, I even think Dana Bash knows that it is false in its outset. I mean, like, there's not a way to conflate in good faith using reconciliation to give massive tax breaks and using reconciliation to provide relief for people in a time of massive crisis. I mean, Bernie Sanders' position on the filibuster, I don't know if it's changed, but he's still consistent here. I don't think he seems like he still is on board with filibuster reform, but not abolishing it altogether. I don't agree with him on that. But to say that there's inconsistency in his position here, I just think it's false.
Well,
framing.
The fascinating thing is that whenever Sanders, I shouldn't say whenever, but very often, you see Sanders critiques on these process things or on his approach, never a direct frontal investigation of what he's fighting for.
Exactly.
Because it would sound ludicrous to the American public if Dana Bash or any commentator on the news went at him and actually said, well, wait a second, the merits of daycare. You know, why would we want that? Or $15 minimum wage when we know that if we'd been keeping up with productivity, the wage would be at somewhere around $23, $24. I mean, or the whole litany of things that he was discussing. Like, you could do that. You could interrogate the the relative merit of that in the same way that you would interrogate the relative merit of, should we really have tax cuts for billionaires? Should we really zero out corporate taxes?
It's a procedural critique as opposed to a policy critique, which they very rarely engage with him on. It's always, let's see if we can call you out as a procedural hypocrite, because the moral stance that he is on is just like indisputable.
The moral and the just sort of the, in terms of like, I mean, it's really fundamentally a question of how you define what benefit to society is.
Yeah. And again, it's just the fetishization of compromise and bipartisanship for compromise and bipartisanship's sake in the media. That's what frustrates me so much. That's what's latent in her question to him.
All right, we're going to take a break here. When we come back, we'll be talking to Astra Taylor and Elizabeth Alvarez on the Biden Jubilee 100 campaign. We'll be right back in just a moment. Folks, just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can join the Majority Report and support the free show by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get the free show, free of ads, and you support the free show, and you get extra content just about every single gosh darn day. Also, check out AM Quickie, amquickie.com. It's 7 minutes of headline news. Quick bingo bango in the morning. By the time you wake up, unless you're like, I don't know, going fishing and you're getting out at like, I guess now it'd be like ice fishing.
Yeah. That sounds really pleasurable, by the way.
Well, and if you do go out ice fishing, just if you're going somewhere where there's connectivity, you can download it or listen to it when it comes online around 7:30 or something like that. So good luck with the fishing. But assuming you're not, it's going to be there when you wake up. amquickie.com. It's completely free. You can find it on your podcast server, or go to amquickie.com, or it's on the app, the Majority app at majorityapp.com, which is also a free app. Okay, I want to welcome back to the program Astra Taylor, and welcome to the program for the first time, Elizabeth Alvarez. Elizabeth is a student debt organizer, policy student for the Debt Collective. Astra, Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hello.
Hi. All right, Astra, let's start with you. Just tell me the history of the Debt Collective and sort of this, when this movement started gaining some traction.
Yes, thanks so much for having me on. This is exciting. The Debt Collective is a union for debtors that has its roots in the Occupy Wall Street movement. During those days of Occupy, I just realized it's the 10th year anniversary this year, 2021. Time flies. We actually organized something called 1T Day, a protest marking the day student debt surpassed $1 trillion. So now student debt stands at $1.7 trillion. If something doesn't happen, we're going to be protesting 2T Day under a Biden administration. So the idea is that our debts are somebody else's assets. They're a form of leverage. So we invite debtors to come together, just like workers come together in a labor union, to demand cancellation and to demand the provision of public services. So in this case, free college for all. Just, what we had generations ago in this country, public quality education for those who want it, so that we don't have student debt destroying lives. 45 million debtors, and it's causing incredible stress of mind and body. People can't plan for their futures. They can't plan for retirement. Seniors are getting their Social Security garnished. I mean, it's a crisis, and partly why the crisis is recognized now is because the Debt Collective has been pushing this issue since those days in Zuccotti Park.
So, Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about your story, because in many respects, it's typical of I guess hundreds of thousands of people, millions across the country in many respects.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Sam. So my story starts at St. John's University. I come from an immigrant background. My family migrated to this country in the mid-90s. And like many Americans, I was told, go to school, everything will be okay. As some people might know, St. John's University's tuition is very, very high. And I signed on these loans, and now I'm about $80,000 into student debt. There I studied political science because, of course, I too wanted to have an impact on, you know, like the shaping of our country, etc. But unfortunately, I've been saddled by this debt.
How much of that is principal at this point? I mean, and how much of it is sort of just accruing, you know, interest?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I originally borrowed $40,000, and now it's now doubled. I double checked my interest rates as I've been organizing with the debt collective, and my highest interest loan is 11%.
Are you? Let me just ask you this question. You're not like 80 years old, are you? I mean, like, no, but it's like that is stunning amount of interest, and we should say, like, I mean, you strike me as someone who's fairly young. I mean, most people do now at my age, but I mean, that's an extraordinary amount of money to have accumulated. How, if you don't mind me asking, how long have you been out of college?
5 years.
That's nuts. I mean, I'm sorry. That's just absolutely nuts. Who owns your debt, your loan? Like, who is making all of this money off of you to presumably go to a university, become a better citizen? I like to think that universities are doing that. I mean, who owns all that? Who's going to get all that profit from you?
Yeah, so my servicer is Nelnet. They're one of the many servicers, including Sallie Mae, etc. Yeah.
Servicer, but I mean, who loaned you the money?
Oh, the American government. These are all federal loans.
This is such an important point. The vast majority, over 95% of student debt, is held by the federal government. The federal government makes an enormous profit off of lending to students, and it's completely unnecessary. That's not what the government's for. That's not what the state is for. However, that gives student debt its power, and this is why the debt collective focuses on it, because all of this debt is owned by the federal government. The federal government can get rid of it. In fact, the debt collective is demanding that Joe Biden cancel all student debt using the authority he already has. It's called Compromise and Settlement Authority. It was granted by Congress to the Department of Education, to the executive branch back in 1965. The ability to create debt implies the ability to cancel it. And so this is one of the things that the Biden administration can solve right away without going through Congress, without dealing with Mitch McConnell and the obstructionist Republicans. And so it's a policy choice actually to perpetuate this harm. And you're so right to point out how impossible this math is for people. This is not a rare story.
This is like we're all implicated in this. We're all basically, a bunch of payday lenders. I mean, honestly, this like the idea that that debt has doubled in the years that you would have graduated. And I want to get back, and I just want to just add to what you were saying, Astra, is that the authority that Joe Biden exercised on day one when he continued the moratorium on collecting interest through COVID is exactly the same authority that we could go in on a Word doc, change a couple of the words, his signature would be just as valid. But I want to go back a little bit and talk a little bit about the 2015 student debt strike, Astra, just get a sense of how this is developed, because I think it's difficult for people my age and older to sort of fully appreciate how things have changed dramatically in terms of the cost of a college education, 2 or 4 year education, and also I think like the availability of outright grants and whatnot for people. I think it's just very hard for some of the olds like myself to appreciate what younger people are facing.
This is part of why it's so frustrating, I think, when older people say, oh, I can't believe young people want their loans canceled. It's like, well, I can't believe you got to go to college for free or basically nothing. And there is a brilliant...
I don't mean to interrupt you, but will you please just remind people, like when we say for free, like this is not rhetoric. Like literally 50 years ago, I mean, I'm not that old, when you went to college, there were plenty of opportunities to go for basically nothing.
Exactly that, or you could pay your tuition even at a private university with a part-time job that was paying minimum wage. So things have changed. And in fact, it was a political shift that many people, many historians credit to Ronald Reagan, who wanted to attack the University of California public education system, which promised quality education, whether at community colleges, state colleges, or universities like Berkeley, for free to its citizenry. So there was a right-wing counterattack that was driven by racism and driven by business interests to say, let's not have college be a right, let's have it be a commodity, and let's use student debt actually as a way to quiet down the students who were then engaged in social protests, as we know. So what that did was created a student loan system with very perverse incentives and created the student debt crisis as we know it. What the Debt Collective did in 2015 was to begin organizing with a group of students who had attended a predatory for-profit college chain called Corinthian Colleges. For-profit colleges get federal money and then charge students huge sums to go for vocational degrees that are usually worthless. And Corinthian served hundreds of thousands of students a year. So these are massive institutions that attract mostly Black and brown, working class, immigrant, veteran, first generation students who are vulnerable and poor to begin with, and then give them this incredible student debt with no opportunity at the end. And it's very important to note that the student loan system is the same, whether you're going to University of Phoenix or Harvard, right? The back end, the money is it all, you follow the chains of it straight to the federal government. Long story short, 15 students calling themselves the Corinthian 15 went on a debt strike. We made a lot of noise about this. Their numbers swelled to the hundreds, then the thousands. The Debt Collective organized a very creative legal strategy. We ended up winning over $1 billion of debt cancellation from the federal government for these students, changes to federal law. And we got the idea that mass student debt cancellation is out there. And that led to the research through one of our co-founders, Luke Herron, the research on compromise and settlement. So we actually had a letter ready to go to Hillary Clinton when we thought she might be the president, saying, cancel student debt, exactly right, with the signature, let's get rid of this problem. So that campaign has led to what we are doing now, which is the Biden Jubilee 100 student debt strikers from all walks of life, all different educational backgrounds that Elizabeth is part of, that are saying we demand full student debt cancellation within Biden's 100 days. That's what the 100 symbolically represent. So we are saying that people who are struggling under the weight of these loans shouldn't feel ashamed. They shouldn't default in silence. They should say, we can't pay these loans. We can't beat this game of the compound interest, and we won't pay because we shouldn't have to pay, because education should be a right.
And just to speak kind of the language of the politicians in DC, who are a lot more concerned with economic growth, in my view, than kind of providing relief for people. Can you touch on what this would mean for the economy? Because my generation, Elizabeth, I would assume we're of the same generation. Home ownership for a lot of us is a fantasy, something like that's just out of reach because of the student debt that we've been saddled with as a generation, and people older than us as well. Can you talk about what that would do for other industries if student debt was canceled? Astra or Elizabeth, either one.
Which one of you wants to take that?
I mean, I'll just quickly say there's research that says that canceling all student debt would be $108 billion a year boost to the economy. Over 10 years, that's over $1 trillion. That would create over a million jobs a year. So certainly in COVID, we need this. But I think, I would throw this question to Elizabeth and say, what would you spend your money on if you weren't paying back the student debt?
Yeah, well, I'm currently pursuing a master's degree in policy precisely because I do want to have an impact in shaping these public matters. But obviously it would be amazing if I could pay for tuition out of pocket, right? Pay for tuition out of pocket. I've also would have loved to, again, buy a home, right? Buy a home. And coming from New York City, that's actually something that's really, really impossible for everyone in my income tax bracket. Unfortunately, 5 years out of college. It would also mean that I could take on service work. I could work for the public sector like I wanted to. However, public sector salaries do not make it so that I'm able to pay my student loans the right way by the law.
I think the president of or maybe it's the former president now of the Home Builders Association said this was like 2 or 3 years ago now, that the number one drag on new home ownership or building rather was student debt. And Elizabeth, just talk a little bit more about this dynamic of what you would do. I mean, because this, I think, is sort of the hard thing to sort of qualitatively assess. What are we losing as a society in terms of quality people who are dedicated to all sorts of roles in society that don't pay enough money to pay off the debt? I mean, I don't know how we can quantify or quantify that, but that seems to me to be where it's almost like our own brain drain that we are inflicting upon ourselves.
Yeah, I think that one really great way to kind of like speak to it quantitatively first is just for context. I before I enrolled in my master's program, I was paying about $900 in student debt per month, both federal and private. And $900 was the average rent in the Bronx, maybe like 5 years ago or so. As you guys know, crowding in New York City households is a huge deal, something that's affecting the COVID-19 pandemic, specifically in my particular zip code. So that's one way to qualify it, I guess. The second way is kind of like going back to like my personal history. I began my studies in journalism. I really wanted to be a journalist and write investigative reporting, very similar to how you do, Sam. And when I graduated, I wasn't able to take on an offer for my first journalism job because the pay was $28,000, and I just simply couldn't afford that. So of course I went in and I worked for the public relations field where I was earning barely even a living wage at just under $45,000. Again, not a living wage. And imagine somebody paying $900 a month on a $45,000 salary. So qualitatively, that's kind of like speaking to how this impacts us.
And it's I mean, it is when you start to sort of like absorb the implications of this, when that only people who are coming from wealth can go into journalism. Only people who are coming from wealth can go into teaching, can go into social services. You start to get a sense of what it can do to a society and to sort of like, and how it builds upon itself over time. All right. So let's do this, Astra. I want to like just present to you some of the arguments that I have heard against this. Now, I should also say, I just want to add into this, that I just saw a report from the American Association of University Women that Black women are the highest, have the highest student debt across the board. So I think 56% more than white men, which I would imagine is a function of at least two things I can think of off the top of my head. One is obviously the earnings power of men when they graduate is greater, even if they don't, presumably, is greater than women, and particularly women of color. And so they have the ability to pay it off so that they're not double the interest, the amount that they had to pay off 5 years after college. And the other is, I think, when we talk about these for-profit universities, they're a big, not all of them, but the vast majority of them, their business plan is to target women of color who are not able to move through the job force and perceive that they need a college degree to get to the next level in their careers. And so they are often taken into these things. And one of these things these companies do, and I should say, we interviewed Tressie McMillan Cotton about this. I think it was maybe 2 years to the day, actually, back in January of 19. They don't provide you data. I'm like, hey, this is what your return on investment is. People just presume, and understandably so. All right, but give us a sense of like, how is this fair, Astra? Like, what do you say to the person who says like, well, I foregoed, vacations and I paid it off, or and so I paid off my debt, or this is only like a gift to wealthy people who can go to college. What do you say to that?
Oh, I have some stuff to say to that because I do hear it a lot. First, I do want to say on your for-profit point, I would invite people to watch a film that is just up at the Intercept website, You Are Not Alone, that I made that has a lot of stories about this and the Corinthian strike. It just went up today. So we hear this now. In fact, Betsy DeVos wrote a farewell letter. Farewell, Betsy. And what she said was, don't listen to those people demanding full debt cancellation because it will be a handout to the wealthy. So it was a very funny thing for Betsy to say. This is a talking point these days that full student debt cancellation is regressive. It's not true. Student debt is regressive because the children of billionaires and the children of millionaires don't have to borrow money to attend college, right? So already you've only got certain classes of people borrowing to go to school. And as you say, the burden falls most heavily on Black women. They hold the most student debt because of a lack of intergenerational wealth and exactly wage discrimination and the existence of for-profit colleges. So there is research by lots of great economists. Derek Hamilton comes to mind saying, you want to have the maximum impact in terms of closing the racial wealth gap, cancel all the student debt. You want to have the most equity, cancel all the student debt. So this is something, the research is pretty clear, but it's a popular talking point. I paid off my student loans. And the fact is, I'm excited for people like Elizabeth and the rest of the Biden Jubilee 100 to be freed from these debts. Just because I had to pay, I don't believe that other people should have to suffer under this. I think we will benefit as a society and as a democracy from a more fair system. The line I also often hear, which you got at very well, Sam, is, well, what if some doctors or some lawyers get their loans canceled? Assuming that these are well-paid people selfishly pursuing their own ends. What you've illustrated is that many of them would go to public service. We know, for example, that there's a shortage of dentists in rural areas because people graduate from dentistry school with so much debt, they have to work in highly populated cities to pay those loans back. So we're all suffering and we'd all benefit from full cancellation. We'd have this economic boost. People would spend money in their communities. People could pursue public interest careers. It's a win-win for everyone, and Joe Biden can do it this afternoon.
Well, you mentioned dentistry, and I thought about doctors and lawyers as well, and them being predominantly, probably, I'm sure the data bears this out, coming from wealthy backgrounds, and the trickle down that effect has, right? So we have a lot of medical racism in this country. That could be an effect of the fact that a lot of people from wealthy families go into pursuing being a doctor, and other people might be discouraged because they just don't have the means to pursue those kinds of careers, and lawyers as well. And can you talk about some of those effects in cultures of professions where they have to pursue degrees that are so out of people's price ranges that they wouldn't even consider it altogether, either of you?
Yeah, in fact, one of the Biden Jubilee 100 strikers is a doctor in Miami, Armin Henderson. He's part of the Dream Defenders, which is a great racial justice group in Florida. And his point is exactly what you're saying. He's saying, I come from a poor household and he owes $600,000 of student loans for his medical degree. He wants to serve people as a physician. But again, this debt often drives people to specialize in certain types of medicine where they'll be higher paid instead of doing the work they want to do with the people who most need equitable healthcare. So it's these perverse incentives that wind up happening. And for Armin, I know I can speak confidently that this is an equity issue. This is one of the reasons that our medical system is so discriminatory and unfair. But $600,000, he'll never pay it off.
Let's talk a little bit about let me ask, I guess both this. So Elizabeth, your debt now is twice the amount of money that you borrowed. And like I say, in 5 years, I just find that just absolutely stunning. And do we have a sense of how much of that $1.7 trillion is just the profit that the U.S. government is going to be making on this?
I've never seen that written. I've never seen that broken down, but that's a brilliant point that we should get the research on that.
Absolutely.
The point is also that 1.7 trillion, again, as I said, it was 1 trillion on one T-Day in 2011. So we are racing towards 2 trillion rapidly. So we get a sense of it in that scale of growth.
All right, let's talk about the other aspect of this, which I think is really important. It's that you don't want to, close the barn door, as it were, when we talk about the opportunity for an option for free university in every state. And let's be very clear about this, because I've actually interviewed some people who were, I can't remember this specific instance, but people assumed it would be ridiculous to have the U.S. government, pay for Harvard University's tuition for everybody. That's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking, when we say free college, we're saying everyone has the opportunity to go to a university, presumably in each state, that is free, that you have the opportunity to go there. You can go to other private institutions if you want to pay more, right? But I mean, if that's what we're talking about, yes?
Yeah. Elizabeth, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what a difference that would make for your generation.
Yeah, I can actually speak to the instance of New York City, my home state. New York did try to enact a free college for all, very popular to, or rather very similar to other schemes that have been implemented in other states. However, it does bar earnings at $150,000, et cetera. But the research has shown that only about 3% of folks have been able to enroll in that, and it does come saddled with a bunch of different caveats around having to live in the state and work in the state for 5 years plus. So even the current schemes that are policy interventions meant to address this are still not comprehensive enough as would be just free college for all. I know several people who have left the country because they're unable to pay their student loans. And I know people that have dropped out of school because they're unable to pay for school. And that's a reality for a lot of Black and Latino folks. So it would.
In that situation, what happens is you accrue a certain amount of debt. You can't go all the way in college because you can't afford anymore. But then you go back out into the job market and your opportunities are limited because you haven't gotten a graduate degree. And so that number, grows and grows. Well, let me ask you this. How problematic would it have been, Elizabeth, if you were forced to have if you had the opportunity to go to a free university in New York State, and there was a couple of billionaire kids in your class? I mean, do we really think as a society that would be a bad thing? That if our billionaire class or our multimillionaire class went to school with, I guess the plebes would be a problem? I mean, isn't this how could that be a bad thing in any situation? And the amount of benefit our society would get from that seems to be exponential. I mean, we paid for two billionaires' kids to go to college.
Right. I think that's people often make that false equivalence, right? That if a really large amount of folks are benefiting from something, and a small amount of folks in this case would be benefiting from something that they're so quote unquote not entitled to. Does the fact that two billionaires' kids going to school for free, does that outweigh the fact that several million kids who aren't able to afford school, are we gonna not do that because it would just benefit two kids? I don't think that makes any sense. So I totally disagree with that.
Well, it's such a paper-thin excuse. I mean, it reminds me of Mitch McConnell, who was just arguing against relief payments on the Senate floor, saying this is only going to benefit rich people. And then you look into it for 1 second, and no, this would broadly benefit people who couldn't afford college in this instance, obviously.
Exactly.
I think COVID makes this so much more important, though, because we also are facing a bigger crisis of universities at this moment. And what COVID showed taught us a lot. But one thing is that the only sustainable source of revenue for our educational institutions, which are critical for society, is public funding, because students didn't want to enroll, so tuition went down. Universities were building all these big stadiums, hoping to get revenue through sports. They were building these fancy apartment, dorm complexes, hoping to get revenue through that. And engaging in all these schemes when it's let's just do the simple thing. Let's fund public schools with public money. And yes, maybe we'll cut down on some of the bells and whistles, right, that these fancy colleges have. But, I think the fact is that, we focus too much on the Harvards, which, serves a couple thousand students, instead of thinking about what it would be like to go back to the original vision that informed the California system, in the middle of the 20th century, the CUNY system, which was built to be free for working class students. We have a model, and that's why there's College for All legislation that was introduced. It's going to be reintroduced in a couple months that basically figures this out and would I think be a dramatic improvement for students from all walks of life and more sustainable and robust when a crisis hits.
And just lastly, just so that we're sort of like, covering all of the bases here. I have not seen, and I'm curious about the proposal that you're talking about. I have not seen a proposal for a free option of college in every state that does not include a similar parallel funding for vocational things, for vocational studies, as opposed to liberal arts university. Is that right, Astra?
Well, the College for All bill makes all public colleges 2- and 4-year institutions. So a lot of 2-year institutions are, focused on associate degrees and more vocational. So I think what it does, though, is it allows people to go for that bigger 4-year degree if that's what they want. College for all who want it, we could say it is. And I think that, it's important that people have a vocational option, but what we've done, I think part of what student debt has done is it's forced us to think of education strictly in terms of job training, because what happens when you have so much student debt is all you need is that job at the end to pay back your debt. And so we are also robbing people of the ability to take that longer time to learn, to explore, to acquire those insights they might need to be, as you said, citizens in a democracy. So I think vocational training is important, should be subsidized too, but we should also give working people the opportunity to have 4 years to be students.
Lastly, Elizabeth, I want you to just give us a sense of how big of an issue is this with your contemporaries? I mean, how much does this dominate the conversation? And I would imagine on some level, social lives, everything on some level, because you've got this sort of massive cloud hanging over you 24/7.
Yeah. I don't know a single person without student debt. Just from my social network, I don't know anyone. And it's just, it is something that we talk about constantly because it impacts so many aspects of our lives, right? If we go back to the housing question, there are folks who are unable to pay for their living situation without getting their refunds from their loans. Students do depend fully on funding, to go about their lives. So it's very big, and that's part of the reason why I got involved with the Debt Collective, because this issue does need to be organized broadly, as broadly as possible. Again, this issue is a lot bigger than the 2008 crisis.
So, Astra, if people want to get involved in the Biden Jubilee 100 campaign, what do they do? I mean, what are the different sort of levels of involvement can they be? Is it too late for you to go on debt strike? What? Tell us.
One thing we want to do is politicize non-payment. Before COVID, 1 million plus people were defaulting on their student loans every year. I defaulted back when I had student loans. We're trying to also say, don't do that ashamed and isolated. Join this political movement. So, the fight is likely not going to end at the end of these 100 days. So go to debtcollective.org, join the union. That's what we need to have, power in numbers, because our debts overwhelm us individually, but together we can overwhelm the system. So there's petitions to sign, there's calls to join. Obviously, we are organizing in a pandemic context, so a lot of stuff is virtual. So if people want to get involved in this, they can immediately go to debtcollective.org, and there's meetings throughout the week.
Astra Taylor, Elizabeth Alvarez, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. It's just sort of stunning to me that people could be aware of this, know how easy it is for Joe Biden to do this. And we don't even know, just wave off this 1.7 trillion. That's supposedly amortized at least 30, 40 years out anyways. A huge percentage of that is interest. And we could just rid our society of this problem with a stroke of a pen. It just seems stunning to me. Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment to wrap things up. We're back. I just,
It was great.
Well, there's so much. It's so easy to deal with this problem and to move forward with it. It's just, it's inexplicable. There is a bill, right, that Schumer and Warren have introduced or plan to introduce to relieve $50,000 debt per person. But you listen to someone like Elizabeth and you're like, you didn't even borrow $50,000. You borrowed $40,000 and you owe $80,000 5 years out. That's just, it's.
Yeah, and then college for all, the proposal that Bernie Sanders put forward, and it's off the top of my head, but it was just such a small amount of money. I think it's like $72 billion. I could be wrong. Matt or Brendan, if you don't mind looking that up just to fact check me. But it's a common sense problem, and I think a huge part of the issue is one that, like, obviously banks get enriched by a lot of these student loans. The federal government gets enriched by this. And then also just that members of Congress and people in power are removed from this being a reality. They're just not, they don't deal with it as wealthy people.
I think there's also I don't want to say non-rational one, although I would say that all of these arguments are non-rational, but it's two-part. I think there is a concern that there's a puritanical, I think, sort of value system about, the moral hazard that we're creating if we let people think that they can get away with without repaying their debts. I mean, at least in the narrow context of universities, you wouldn't have the need for this type of debt if you added a college for all type of situation. But the other is that, like, look, we see debt discharged all the time for corporations, for individuals in the context of bankruptcy court. Our society has a long, endless, predates the Americans' project of debt relief. And the idea that it is a moral hazard only when it applies to people not wealthy enough to pay for college is
ludicrous.
It's ludicrous. It's perverse.
$48 Brendan just sent per year to eliminate tuition fees for four-year public colleges and universities. I think there's a higher end that's estimate that's $72 billion, but that's right. I mean, that's nothing for the federal government. That's nothing.
And Grabe would point out that it's about control, right? I mean, I think that's exactly why. I mean, Nancy McLean ruffled so many feathers because she suggested that this was a response to like the Angela Davis and the 70s campus activism, that we need to have these kids start paying for this and, have to go into corporate jobs afterwards and that sort of thing. And I think that rings really true. And the more that we just don't do the obvious here, I think that's what it's about. It's about control.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think you can make the same argument about healthcare as well, right? I mean, there was a time 10, 15 years ago where you would hear nothing but every car that rolls off the line for GM, $3,200 of it is healthcare. Well, then why wouldn't you have an outcry from businesses to say, like, we're going to offload this expense onto the federal government? Yes, we'll pay marginally more in taxes, but we don't need to have we don't need to have an entire, we don't need to have a side business of, in human resources trying to figure out how we're going to do health insurance. And I think a big part of it is simply, it's a function of control. If you are in college, and you're basically building this massive, I just can't even imagine 5 years out of college, having an $80,000 bill, and you're just looking around your apartment, and it's like, wait, where's the expensive painting that I bought? Where's the 75-foot television that I bought for what?
It's the avocado toast that the millennials keep buying. That's why they're not buying homes. And I've had conversations with people, by the way, who say, like, I had to pay off my student loan debt. Why shouldn't everybody else? Like, there is a legitimate, old school kind of thinking in that way, which is beyond comprehension to me, but some people really feel that way.
I wonder if they would apply that same logic to, say, I don't know, the COVID vaccine. That because no one was protected by the COVID vaccine last year, and people passed away, that no one in the future should have COVID vaccine either. I mean,
people died of cancer. Listen, maybe you should die of cancer too.
The fact of the matter is,
improve things.
I imagine in specific instances, it's not the case. But broadly speaking, as a society, we had this in the 50s, in the 60s, 40s, into the 70s. No cost, or extremely low cost, negligible cost, universities, and quality universities. And it is a benefit to society, broadly speaking. And in terms of fairness, obviously, it was unfair that was available 30, 50 years ago, and it's not available today. So that stuff, I think people should understand when they hear those complaints. They are complaints that are either A, not terribly well thought out or researched or contextualized, or B, disingenuous. But as a society only, if you merely believe in the idea that our job is only to provide opportunity, people must understand as a society, which I think it doesn't go far enough, but I understand that people just feel that that should be the function. When you are making university or higher education in any form prohibitively expensive, you are curtailing the opportunity of millions upon millions of your fellow Americans. And Joe Biden can fix this in the amount of time it takes me to pour a cup of coffee. They know the language, they know he can do it, and he can do it. So check that out. We'll put a link to that on the post today at majority.fm. We will be back with more tomorrow. Emma, we'll see you then. I lied. I'm going to see you now. I see.
Yeah, I know.
We're still here.
It's the daily lie that we all agree to.
That's right.
That the show ends.
That the show ends at that point. Well, I mean, it does. Well, we really have three iterations of the show.
Yeah.
We have the show that they just rerun on the Peacock channel.
Mm-hmm. That's the Charmander, if you will.
The what?
It's a Pokemon thing.
Oh my!
A Pokemon metaphor.
That's the first evolution.
The Charmander, and then the second evolution is
Charmeleon.
Oh my Lord, Charmeleon, and then of course we have the fun half, which is the
Charizard.
Is there anything else?
No.
That kind of works for Charizard.
Pretty good.
I hate that that's off the top of my head.
You're going to have to prime me of that, because I'm going to go and I'm going to freak Saul out today. And I come back and I'm like, dude.
It's my favorite Pokemon, I think.
You got to figure, you got to teach me on some way in which I can work that into conversation with him. I'm just like, what's going on with Charmeleon today?
Yeah, he's like the lizard. I don't know if he's a little orange lizard, then he grows into like a big dragon, pretty much. Pretty sick.
Folks, just a reminder, if you want the full lowdown on what's going on with Pokemon, become a member of the show today. You can go to jointhemajorityreport.com. Also, justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Get 10% off. You join us in the fun half day. Things got a little crazy over the weekend with me and Twitter, and with the whole force the vote crowd. And then
Jimmy Dore went and platformed a Boogaloo Boy, and then things No, the best part was that we covered that he platformed the Boogaloo Boy. Then he proudly tweeted out about the Boogaloo Boy.
We covered that he was praising a video of the Boogaloo Boy.
Right.
And then he invited the guy onto his show.
Oh, so he... Yeah. So
and interviewed him, and then was like... supposedly he did we'll talk about this. He did a follow-up video where he was like, this is a gettable guy for us. Well, dude, then why are you tweeting out to your followers on how great the Boogaloo guys are? It's a little bit sideways. But don't forget, check out Nomiki's show. Tuesday through Friday. You can find it at 3 p.m. at youtube.com/The Nomiki Show. I also I mispronounced Navalny today. Matt had to walk me through it beforehand, and I just can't get it. Did I say it just right then? Navalny?
Yep, I think that's right.
Oh, okay.
Also, he has a bad position on Black Lives Matter, so screw him.
Navalny does?
Well, Russia's a little bit. Russia makes parts of America look very, very progressive on race.
Yes, I would imagine. Jamie.
Hello.
What's happening on the Antifada this week?
I'm so glad you asked. Well, this week on the Antifada, I guess we made up for our little detour into neoliberalism last week because we had on our friends Jared Shanahan and Zana Kurti to talk about some of their work for the journal Hard Crackers, which was started by Noel Ignatieff, who was a great thinker who died last year. So we talked about their reporting on the George Floyd uprising and their reporting on the far right. And we had a really good far-ranging conversation with them. So that's coming out on Wednesday, patreon.com/theantifada. Also, still good, our episode from last week, wherein I go over the Obama book with Andre Demise and Aaron Thorpe. And that was a pretty spicy episode as well.
You're going to get me to read that, and I have a feeling I'm going to resent it.
Well, we read it, so you don't have to, Sam.
Yes, that's true, but now I feel like compelled that I got to.
I mean, knock yourself out. It's horrible. It'll make you feel bad.
The Obama one, the Bezos Amazon Press gives it away for free on Audible. So it's trying to get in people's minds, which is interesting.
Oh my God. It's like that fucking U2 album that they put on all our phones. It's just like that. Pardon my French. I'm very tired today. I forgot I'm not supposed to swear.
They automatically downloaded what was it, 4 years ago or something like that with an iPhone update. Everyone got the YouTube.
Oh, I haven't updated my phone in 4 or 5 years. I'm still using I don't know.
It's like I don't know if you guys saw.
It's like 3 or something.
Did you guys see that movie Pop Star? It's like the Lonely Island movie.
Oh, great movie, yeah.
It's really underrated comedy, and they have a marketing scheme to get his album out there where they put it in dishwashers, basically like GE. They pair up with it, so when you open the refrigerator, you hear his album, something like that.
Oh God. No, they're just gonna find a way to tattoo the Obama book on the insides of our eyelids, I think.
There's a song from Popstar called Incredible Thoughts that is sort of the Dave Rubin anthem. People should check it out.
Yeah, I love the other one where the Bin Laden song is pretty good too.
Matt, what's happening on the Matt Leckian media universe?
So we did 3 hours last Thursday on Left Reckoning. Go check that out. It was fun. We have an interview with Milton Alamadi, and we talk about a lot of other stuff. But on Literary Hangover, episode 36 just dropped, The Secret Diary of William Byrd of Westover. We talk about the slave plantation owner / Indian trader who had some kind of descendants to George Washington and Robert E. Lee. We go through his secret diary that he recorded in code and then got revealed. And so there's a lot of interesting insight into the 1709 Virginia James River plantation milieu there. So check that out, patreon.com/literary hangover for that.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and head into the fun half, wherein we will take your phone calls and also endeavor to read your IMs. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
And for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back, boys back, and the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ the Anarchy song, please? please.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck 'em. Fuck 'em. Almost says what? Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
and the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy! I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are. Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
It's so low to me. We are back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot to get to. We got a lot of clips. I have a feeling we got a lot of IMs and calls today. Some trending that went along over the course of the weekend. Where did everybody go?
One interesting trending that is sort of unrelated to all this was Larry King passed, and
I know
the clip of him taking a phone call about Mookie Betts being traded during the middle of a conversation with Dave Rubin trended in response to that, which was funny.
Oh, that was so good.
There was also, I saw a clip of Larry King going back and forth with Rubin, and Rubin saying we can afford a certain amount of death, and Larry King's like, come on, Dave, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I wonder if like honestly, like if Dave Rubin has like even a moment of like, God, this is my hero who died. He died of COVID, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he had gotten COVID.
He had it recently.
Yeah, I imagine that.
But he was released from the hospital. He's also 87 years old.
Yeah, I imagine that didn't help him. But
I mean, I recently snitch tagged Rubin to Larry King because Rubin does flirt with COVID denial every once in a while, and Larry King and his sort of fealty to Larry is the one thing I think that was keeping him honest. So I think we can expect a bit of a more of a deeper dive into those waters now from Dave.
Can't wait.
Let's see what else we have here. Well, tomorrow we're going to go through a lot of these clips, I think, too, because we're going to be talking about impeachment tomorrow a little bit and all the sort of stories that have come out about Donald Trump really made a very, very strong attempt to stay in office. And he had like 4 lines of defense or 5 lines of defense, ranging from, I'm going to fire the U.S. attorney in Georgia if he doesn't find their voter fraud. I'll call Raffensperger. Lindsay will call Raffensperger. We're going to fire the U.S. acting attorney general. Yeah. And then if that doesn't work, I'll just get some guys to come in and intimidate the lawmakers when they certify the vote. And I mean, this is, I wonder if Chuck Schumer is like, we're going to punt for 2 weeks the impeachment just because we're going to have more stories that come out. And And we'll have more to prosecute him on.
I mean, Trump is eerily quiet right now. Him without social media,
Well, yeah,
it's just
exactly.
like
because he's been deplatformed.
Exactly.
It makes me uneasy. I tweeted this last night. I'm like, I have this like constant state of, not that I'm not rolling over.
It's okay, you miss me.
We can go Biden, but just the feeling of constantly being afraid or anticipating this unpredictable move of just scandal, and it's just around the bend all the time. It's just a little weird to get out of that mindset, you know?
No, I know the tweets help us know where he is, you know? Yeah. Like maybe it has a little location signature on it sent from the White House. Like now he could be anywhere.
You've all got post-Trump derangement syndrome.
Well, let me read this story.
Exactly.
And then we'll get into stuff, a little bit more stuff, although, you know, it's the fun half. So this is really sad. Maybe I should just do a little bit of this. Because, you know, they say home is where the heart is. And for Donald Trump, that's at Mar-a-Lago. Business Insider reports that former President Donald Trump's return to his glitzy Mar-a-Lago resort is said to have been met with little fanfare by the club's wealthy members. In fact, the author of a book... What the heck? The author of a book on the Florida resort says the mood is dispirited and that people are canceling their memberships. What? This is when he needs your memberships the most. I've talked to a bunch of people the last couple of days, the author Lawrence Leamer told MSNBC. A lot of people have quit Mar-a-Lago. Leamer, who wrote Mar-a-Lago Inside the Gates of Power at Donald Trump's presidential palace, and they remarked that members were leaving over concerns they might be featured in newspaper articles.
Oh.
They don't want anything to do with Donald Trump. Many of the members, they're not going there very often because it's a dispirited place. It's a sad place for Trump to be hanging out. It's not what it was. They're walking away from him. Even here, people don't like him. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities to snag some of those $200,000 a year memberships.
Yeah, he
ladies
needs
and
those, though, given his financial situation and pending legal battles. Probably needs some cash on hand. So double whammy of emotional backstabbing.
Do you think that there is a wait list there? Or do you think that like he lets every single person in who wants him to be a part?
Should we do Majority Report live from Mar-a-Lago? I could probably get in.
I mean, maybe they'll discount the memberships. I don't know. I mean, I can see how it would have less of an appeal now that you can't watch Donald Trump, you know, in real time, like serving overcooked meat and mayo-based salads to the Prime Minister of Japan or whatever, you know?
I'm picturing one of those, you know, like those old Florida resorts for just old people. Like if you've ever come across one of those that are, it smells of impending death, you know? And like everything's a little outdated. That's
decorated like the Golden Girls house.
Yeah, like a Golden Girls set thing, right? But without the incredible B. Arthur.
Aww.
All right, let's play this. We know now that there is the CDC, the head of the CDC has basically said we have no idea how much coronavirus vaccine is in the country. We just don't know. We just never set up an apparatus to keep track of it. So, you know, sorry. Here is Deborah Bricks saying that there were Burks, I should say.
I like Deborah Bricks, though.
Bricks, yes.
Well, that's when she brings the hammer.
She was on CBS's Face the Nation saying that there were parallel data streams. In other words, nobody knew what was going on.
Do you think President Trump appreciated the gravity of the health crisis you were describing?
I think the president appreciated the gravity in March. It took a while after I arrived in the White House to remove all of the ancillary data that was coming in. I mean, there was parallel data streams coming into the White House that were not transparently utilized. And I needed to stop that. Where people
You mean outside advisors?
outside advisors coming to inside advisors. And to this day, I mean, until the day I left, I'm convinced there were parallel data streams because
disinformation.
I saw the president presenting graphs that I never made. So I know that someone out there or someone inside was creating a parallel set of data and graphics that were shown to the president. I don't know to this day who, but I know what I sent up, and I know that what was in his hands was different from that.
That is so insane.
Right. So
she's there as window dressing.
Yeah. She's the scientist, and then he also gets the packet of make Trump feel better info.
Yeah, except for that's the operational one.
Yeah.
And, you know, here's an idea, okay, with all due respect to the doctor. If you see over time that you are making graphs for your boss about this pandemic, and he's holding up, stuff that, I don't know, Stephen Miller gave him or Navarro.
Scott Atlas.
Whoever it is, some lunatic. And you're not being listened to. Here's an idea. Resign. She resigned anyways, eventually. Resign. But let the American public know that he is specifically not listening to. You're there as window dressing.
Were you in favor of Fauci resigning? I don't know if I agree with you.
I think Fauci's role was more operational outside of the White House.
Yeah, but she was more sympathetic to him, too, it seemed always, right? Birx to Trump.
I think the idea was that she is there advising him. I think Fauci is actually running an apparatus. Okay. And so her only job was to provide window dressing for him.
But if you really are convinced of the gravity of the situation, you're like, I'm the only adult in the room that can potentially get through to him. So that would be the
I guess you hang in there for an extended period of time.
Right.
Well, the important takeaway from this is that none of it was her fault and no one should be mad at her.
Right.
So
that is definitely her objective, probably on the media tour, right?
I should be on the board of directors of some major corporation right now. And of course, I did my best.
Yeah, well, I mean, Fauci's even being more forthright now. He went on Maddow's show and talked about how I was blocked from coming here for months and months because the White House didn't like the information that I was providing. So, I mean, we knew all of this anyway, but the fact that they're saying it publicly, I guess, has some value.
Right.
Although over 400,000 dead bodies might think otherwise.
Yeah, I would agree. Here is Fox and Friends trying to, I guess, I don't know, just make sense of all of it. This is, I can't even believe, I feel like I would be curious if they ever said the word super spreader event prior to Joe Biden taking the oath of office, but here it is.
Evidently, according to our sources, they're about to, the Biden administration, reimpose an entry ban all non-U.S. travelers, Brazil, the United Kingdom, Ireland, and 26 other countries of Europe. Okay, they're worried about the pandemic. Let me ask you something. Has anybody there been vaccinated? Do you think they're all wearing masks? Do we have any idea who's in this caravan? So if you're comfortable if you're not comfortable with people coming from the UK and Ireland here, why would you be comfortable? Why would you be comfortable with thousands coming by caravan?
Pause it. Go back a little bit. I want everybody to look at something. There's a little bit of a clue here to the disingenuous. When was this clip? This is from today, right? Monday, the 25th. This clip they're playing is from January 17th. There is no more caravan, folks. The caravan has broken up. I imagine some folks have head home or they're seeking refuge somewhere else, but there is no caravan. But they need to like play this out and create the drama that it's coming for your second home up in your lake house in Minnesota. But continue. Just want to point out that.
Has anybody there been vaccinated? Do you think they're all wearing masks? Do we have any idea who's in this caravan? So if you're comfortable,
let's vaccinate.
If you're not comfortable with people coming from the UK and Ireland here, why would you be comfortable? Why would you be comfortable with thousands coming by caravan into our southern border and you're not actually throwing anybody out? for 100 days.
They don't have houses here, right? So where are they going to quarantine? He's going to have to
together
too.
all together in facilities that aren't even built yet.
And we had heard that with that particular caravan from last week, where there were 8,000 people, that apparently there were a lot of instances of COVID. As it turns out, those 8,000 only made it 27 miles into Guatemala before they were stopped and turned around and sent home. And you know how Guatemala did it? It used to be that to come into the country of Guatemala for people who are in Nicaragua or El Salvador or Honduras, all you had to do was show an ID card. That's all you had to do. That's why there were so many thousands of people, because they all had ID cards. Now, Guatemala is quite accurately and aptly asking for a negative COVID test. And that is one of the reasons they are able to disband these groups, because they are smart. They realize, wait a minute, this is a super spreader event, and the United States will not stand for it.
Well, I will say, I did hear they dispersed and are still making their way up. They're just not doing it in bigger groups.
Small groups, but nonetheless, to get into Guatemala, you've got to have a negative test. The whole thing is, as people in the Central America countries see Joe Biden dismantle portions of Donald Trump's immigration plan, the question is, how much of stay in Mexico and other things will this administration keep in place?
They don't want it.
Right now, they don't know.
They don't want the Remain in Mexico policy. He called up Obrador and said, yeah, we're going to end that. Really? I was doing you a big favor. You want to end it? That's fine with me.
Right, the cooperation between the countries.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the negative COVID testing, by the way, is a part of Biden's new executive orders for travel from different countries. Not the ones he specifically banned, but if you're doing international travel, he's requiring negative COVID tests.
And on top of which, of course, the countries that he's talking about have a specific strain of COVID
what
that they're trying to...
I thought they were so in favor of travel bans. They were like, the libs don't like him doing a travel ban, which wasn't true. But like he specific, they now are, you know, all opposed to it because it affects white people because it's coming from England.
Well, what could the difference possibly be?
I can only imagine. And what about the idea that that Kilmeade spent like 3 or 4 minutes building up this entire terror that is existing in terms of the caravan, and then Doozy comes over and goes like, actually, it doesn't exist anymore.
What I heard,
it could be secret caravans now, which are even worse.
No, we don't know. It could be stealth caravan with stealth caravan technology. I mean, look, they also spend a lot of time talking about how, they're not going to be able to afford to quarantine. They don't have homes, yada, yada, as if quarantining is the responsibility of the individual to do it and pay for it, and not the responsibility of the government that's trying to deal with this public health crisis. I mean, look, my friend just went to New Zealand to visit her parents, and the government put her up in a hotel for 2 weeks when she got there. Like, that is a thing that you can do.
That happens in countries all through East Asia. The same, you walk off the plane, they're just like, we'll show you to your hotel. Here's another idea. Like, if you're concerned, first of all, I love that they're embracing quarantines now over Fox. But here's another idea. We institute the Defense Production Act in this country. We start sending vaccinations all around the globe, including down to Guatemala and to Honduras. We take them down to the border, and you get a test and you get a vaccine.
No, well, the argument would be Joe Biden putting other nations first with vaccinations.
Let's do ours too. Let's do ours too.
I agree. I mean, but that's the problem with for-profit healthcare. So I'm seeing all these, concerned articles in the New York Times about how countries in Africa are not going to be vaccinated potentially until 2024, and how outrageous that is. That is absolutely outrageous. But like the existing structure of for-profit healthcare throughout the globe and big pharma, that's what this creates. I mean, like that's the result. There's not a systemic critique about this. Obviously, we're not going to find that on Fox News.
Where do I have that?
Wait, so Fox is so interested in having these people in the caravan coming from South America being vaccinated. Maybe they're in favor of kind of socializing this vaccine project. Maybe we should get them on board there.
And strict quarantines too.
Yeah. But then put everyone in hobbit homes, honestly.
Oxford University was going to, it's about 5 months ago, apparently, according to Kaiser Health News, Oxford University was going to open source its vaccine. And according to Kaiser Health News, and this was sent to me by Paris Marks on Twitter. A few weeks later, Oxford, urged on by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, reversed course. It signed an exclusive vaccine deal with AstraZeneca that gave the pharmaceutical giant sole rights. No, with the less publicized potential for Oxford to eventually make millions from the deal and win plenty of prestige. I mean, this is so twisted. In April, they promised to donate the rights to its coronavirus vaccine to any drug maker. And then somebody got in the area and said, like, but wait a second, think of what it's going to mean for your branding.
I know. Now we can be paternalistic and white saviory.
And now AstraZeneca does not have the ability to produce the number of vaccinations that they said they could. And the bottom line is, because Oxford wanted to get this sort of like this sheen, they sold it to a private company. The private company can't deliver. Job number one, profits. And where you could have had a half a dozen, maybe more, vaccine makers producing this stuff, now you only have one and you don't have enough vaccines. I mean, this is almost like, it's not identical, but it's certainly analogous to what happened with Katrina in terms of the buses. The story of the buses was there were supposed to be buses there, but instead of the federal government and FEMA doing this directly, they had contracted it out to a private enterprise. That enterprise had subcontracted it out. There was like 3 subcontractors, and the buses were, I don't know, sitting a couple of hours away. And these guys are contemplating like, okay, do we send the buses? Because if we send the buses and they're not needed, we could lose money. So let's wait until the last moment when we get the order for the buses before we send the buses. And then, of course, it was too late.
Or hospital capacity with COVID. Exactly what we're talking about with for-profit hospitals.
Yep.
Bill
Yeah.
Bill Gates got the vaccine, so that's all we really care about.
All safe now. That's good.
It's
all right.
trickle-down vaccine.
Let's go to the phones. To the IMs. I need to call in to the phone system. There we go. All right, so the IMs here. Jimmy Files. Love Bree and Virgil and bad faith, but at one point in the debate, Bree says that TYT, Majority Report, the DSA, our congressional allies, didn't get behind the force to vote. And it's like, yeah, maybe reflect on that. You know, I will say this. Look, I went into that situation not quite fully appreciating what was going to happen. And, force the vote is in the past. It failed. It didn't just fail. Let me be clear here. It didn't just fail in the sense that the progressives in the Congress it didn't do what Force the Vote wanted to do, which was to force a vote on Medicare for all. If I organize 3 million people to put comments in at the FCC to reverse net neutrality, let's say, just to use an example in the past, and net neutrality isn't reversed, okay, that failed, but I did organize 3 million people to send in comments and achieved like the biggest amount of pressure that the FCC has ever received. In this instance, force the vote failed. And I think, many people subscribe to the notion that, people need to be convinced to support a candidate or to support an endeavor or whatever. And the force the vote people failed miserably at that. And one of the reasons they failed to convince me was that it was a middling idea. I didn't think the ask was the right ask, and I said nothing about it. And then it failed even more because Jimmy Dore used it as a weapon to create a wedge between people who are looking to the progressives in Congress to make some change and those progressive the lawmakers. And it alienated people. And, I wasn't saying like, I suppose I could have gone on to bat. They said, you're tactic shaming me, right? Isn't that the thing? Like, if you don't do what I say you do, you're shaming me. But that was not
It was more than that too. Like, well, I mean, it's also conflating a support for a tactic with support for Medicare for all,
absolutely.
which is the worst part.
Absolutely. And
I argue I support Medicare for all a lot more than Jimmy, who supported Tulsi Gabbard in the primary, and I supported Bernie Sanders.
I just wasn't going into, I didn't quite realize that this was going to be sort of a debate to justify anything. And the idea that well, you should have made it about pay-go. Well, it was called Force the Vote. It wasn't called Force the Pay-Go.
They weren't talking about pay-go. You were talking about pay-go.
And, the idea that initially I was just going to sit this out, 1,000 flowers bloom. But and there, the exchange was fine. I was, told over and over again that I was, making it about Jimmy Dore, and I was. I mean, that was the reason why. In fact, I don't know that I ever publicly dissed the Force of the Vote until Jimmy, started saying that AOC was the reason why we don't have Medicare for all, which is just patently absurd and
harmful.
So, I mean, that I agree that I sort of thought what that was going to be a very sort of ally to ally conversation about what we can do better next time, rather than a scolding as to why I didn't get on board with something that I had. I mean, I'll be honest with everybody. Bree knew exactly what I was going to say. I had told her, we had gone back and forth on DMs, and I had said, because initially I'd invited her on to the show, and she didn't want to come on. I invited her on long time ago. She didn't want to come on.
Couple asks, right? Asks.
Well, I mean, look,
before the Christmas break.
Yeah, and she didn't want to come on. That's fine. And so I went on. I was not really, to be honest with you, expecting what it was, but it was what it was, and that's, I didn't perceive that. And then, to be honest with you, following that, the clips that they put out, I just found to be there was something else going on. It was really just more about validating a position that they had for a tactic that had expired, and I didn't appreciate it. So,
well, you guys are both exhausting lawyers, so it was always going to go that way.
I'm not a lawyer. I mean, she was a corporate litigator. I'm not.
You're 2/3 of one, right?
1/3.
You're from a tradition of lawyers.
All right, you're lawyer types, I should say. But I just want to make.
I'm not. I went to second. Our professors were farmed out from Harvard.
All right. Well, I just want to make one point about the DSA because it was brought up on this list, and it's often included alongside media figures like DSA is itself a media figure or organization. But one of these things is not like the others, okay? DSA is, and this was primarily an argument between media figures about what they should be saying, which already I think is putting the cart before the horse a little bit. But DSA especially, it's not a media figure. You can't just get it to, change its mind by tweeting at it, right? It's a sprawling, decentralized, democratic organization with its own process for making decisions on tactics and on strategy. And if you are concerned with what DSA is doing or not doing, or if, maybe you don't believe us that we actually care about Medicare for all, come to a meeting about it and you are welcome to participate in the decision-making process just like anybody else.
And the other thing about that is, meanwhile, while we're having a 3-hour debate on a tactic that has already expired, the DSA is amongst one of, I don't know, a dozen groups having a Healthcare Now conference organized by the nurses union. Literally, I think the kickoff was during that thing.
Shills.
And the moment I mentioned that, well, you know, these are people who have dedicated a good part of their lives to organizing.
But I think tweeting about it is
well,
more
I mean, look,
virtuous
this is the
than
world that we're in, and so we you know, this is the world that we live in, and you know, so fine, we tweet back and forth. But the fact of the matter is that
right. But the point is more just that going after organizations that are dedicating their real time and like who have been a part of an organizing effort for multiple years around this as not virtuous enough based on what a 2-week campaign that's largely based on tweeting. Maybe some self-reflection there might be in order.
I mean, I don't know. I just think that, like, look, if the bottom line is like, how do we get health care? I went on to the show with the idea of like, how are we going to do this? And it didn't turn out that way. And so, I mean, fine. I felt like I walked away from that. I was feeling like, you know, from a purely debate perspective, I felt like, you know, Bree had done a much better job than I did. And I wasn't necessarily anticipating that type of...
I don't think that's true, Sam.
Well, can I say one quick thing? The idea that you failed, particularly, or this show or this array of podcasts failed, like Jimmy Dore touted your tentative support on Rising when he went on and really sparked this thing. He said, even my haters are supporting it now, right? And then it got narrowed. And when he started attacking the work of DSA and journalists, that we started saying, hey, maybe this isn't actually about just getting people to use their leverage. It's about somebody's toxic personality and media branding, because that's what it was.
And I think also it is like quite clearly, I think there is a desire amongst some people, I mean, Jimmy at least, to create a third party, and that this is, and they know that they need to convince people that progressives getting elected to the into the Democratic Party is a useless thing to pursue. And so they want to start a third party. So it's not like a perspective of like electoralism is bad or useless, or that we're pursuing another agenda. Like, I think, you know, DSA might have that perspective of like, you know, our project is not electoral based. It's just
we use electoral tactics, but our overarching project is different. It's socialism.
Right. But if you're starting a third party to, you know, sort of engage in the same exact situation, it is... You're just basically saying we're going to build this from scratch. And if that's what it is, then be explicit about it. You know, just...
And maybe do it. Maybe to win an election somewhere. If
well,
you're a party. That's what parties are meant to do, I thought.
Parties are meant to do a lot of different things. And I really encourage everybody to read the position paper that my caucus, DSA Emerge, put out on the ballot line question and the party question and all of these things that we're talking about. But when I hear electoral third party, I immediately look askance at it, you know, as a socialist and as a communist, because elections are really only the tip of the iceberg in terms of what a party should be and what a workers' party should do and what they have done, the ones that were successful in the past throughout history. The party does so many things, and DSA is not the party yet, but you know what? We do some of the things that a party does. So I guess where I'm going with this is that the ballot line question is kind of a red herring. And if we're going to engage in electoral campaigns, which DSA is going to do, you know, it's always had an electoral focus. That's just one of many working groups. But if we're going to do that, I think it makes less sense to expend all the effort that we would need to expend to have this third-party ballot line. It makes more sense to run opportunistically and parasitically on the Democratic Party ballot line, not with the long-term goal of realigning the party, because I believe it is structurally resistant to that, but with the goal of building up our power so that someday we will have the ability to break from the Democrats and be a real contender and not a joke like the Green Party.
Right. All right, let's take another IM. Cedar half. We didn't
also, this is kind of a silly question, but I was just thinking about it because I was curious. How do you IM into the show as opposed to call?
Oh, how do I? Or how does one?
How does one?
You get the Majority Report app.
Oh.
In fact, you go to majorityapp.com.
Okay.
And you download the app, and then you can IM into the show. All right, let's take a phone call. Calling from a 501 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Bueller.
Yes?
Bueller. 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 Bueller.
Is this just a recording?
Bueller.
I think so.
Bueller.
Okay, I can't get. I don't
Bueller.
have access to the phone. It's not showing up on my phone.
Bueller.
So I can't hang up on the guy.
Just did.
Got it. Okay. Let's go. Calling to an 815 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey guys, this is Ray from Milwaukee.
Ray from Milwaukee. What's on your mind?
Yeah, so I watched the interview you guys had done previously, and Emma brought up a really good point about specifically dentists and how they're essentially shackled in debt. But on top of that, there's a huge need in like rural areas for people, and dentists basically can't go there because of the wages, essentially how much they make, and so they kind of have to stick around the cities. I just kind of want to speak to that.
I think Astra brought up that point, so I can't take credit for it, but it was a great point. No. I mean, I built off of it, but thanks for the compliment. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so like my partner's been a dentist for about 5 years. She recently graduated up in this area, and she essentially wants to work in public health, but kind of can't because of the crippling amount of debt. And what's happening is a lot of dentists, recent graduates even, they're kind of all working in wealthy suburbs. They kind of all have to kind of go into those areas to make enough money to pay off these absurd monthly payments for their student debt. And at the same time, areas, especially here in Milwaukee, are in such desperate need for dentists that they have clinics that are just jam-packed. They can pretty much never have enough people coming through. It's just a dire need, and I think it's like pretty absurd. It's like an absurd situation that we're in, that basically we have an incredible need for dentists and professionals and medical professionals within our cities, and even if you wanted to as a dentist, you kind of can't even provide that care or find a way to give that because you're in so much debt to the banks. So I just wanted to call and give that personal experience. I think it's a really important point, and yeah.
All right. Well, appreciate the call.
It, yeah.
It's a little hinky today. Calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Kowalski from Nebraska.
Kowalski from Nebraska. What's on your mind?
Oh, we're getting some snow, so I'm doing some house carpentry projects, and I've got these cool pencils.
Sweet!
Yeah. So the reason I'm calling in is I wanted to get some tactical advice from you people here on your show. So, as you're well aware, I am an established member of the GOP in Nebraska, and I'm a county delegate to the state convention.
Right.
And, well, we're actually setting an...
Oh, no.
Kowalski from Nebraska. You're a...
TJ's straight of phone problems.
I don't know, is his phone or our phone? We lost him. Let's go. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
No.
509. Hello? Do you hear something? Am I not
static.
connected?
I hear static.
Hold on. I'm calling back in. Hello. Is there anybody on the phone? All right, we're going to have to... I don't know what's going on with the phones today. Anybody on the phone? Weird.
Ooh.
All right.
Sorry about that. That was a big...
Let's go to the IMs here. Threadbare. Seder half chewed steak. Hey, Sam. Great talk with Bree. Unfortunate to get caught making the angry black lady a trope on Twitter. So I think you both made great points and broadened the conversation in a meaningful way. Well, look, I said yelled. I apologize for that. I know people took offense to that, and I changed it. I retweeted out that I should have said admonished, because I was chided for making it all about Jimmy.
With saying yell, like when that's what happened?
I don't know. I think there's a sensitivity to it. I can understand that, and to be more precise, I was admonished throughout the evening for saying that. I mean, that's I'm perfectly willing to, accept that.
Performative admonishment is how I'd put it.
Well, whatever. I mean, the point is that it was more precise, and the point remains is that I think Jimmy Dore is toxic. I think that it's not unreasonable to say, like, hey, the guy, and here's the other thing, is like all of the other proposals that were suggested in terms of asks. Every stream that I saw him on, which was every stream practically for the first, week or two that they were discussing it, was him yelling at somebody about raising anything else. And so, that was when I was like, I'm not interested. I thought I was there to explain why I wasn't part of it. That's why.
I regret ever wading into this, honestly. This is a tactical debate between social democrats. You're all reformist trash to me. But no, Sean, actually, from the Antifada, my podcast, he's on Bad Faith this week, talking about the same thing and dropping some communist knowledge. So I hope people listen to that.
I mean, they're certainly sort of riding this one quite a bit. The Red Baron, Don and Judy Friday News Roundup can feature Don from Mar-a-Lago. Charizard, New York student here. Both my parents are still boomers, still paying off their student loans. A teacher and a lawyer who both work public sector, paying hundreds of dollars a month and never hitting their principal. I'm lucky only to have a few thousand in student debt, but this has to change. It's just absurd. I couldn't believe it. Doubled the interest in 5 years. Or doubled the amount.
Yeah. It's a complete travesty.
Wildcard 2-6 in regards to Golden Girls and B. Arthur. Did you know she was a Marine?
I did not.
She joined in 1943 during World War II. She served as an admin clerk and later a truck driver. This Marine vet very much respected her. Wow, I had no idea.
Wow. She is whatever. That show is just a great sitcom. A warm blanket for me.
Don Glover. In regards to the interest cost of student debt, I saw an analysis by one of the MMT proponents that showed borrowing 1 penny at the time of Christ at a few percent interest compounded yearly would result in a debt equivalent to a piece of gold the size of Saturn just prior to the year 1800. Connor from PA. To build our coalition in non-blue districts, we need to run people for local office so they get experience older voters care about. From the suburbs of PA, I know the resume is more important to many voters than the actual policies. Let's see. Disco Stew. Now that you're on the receiving end of Glenn Greenwald's bad faith bullshit, any regrets about putting up him on a pedestal for the past several years? He's been doing this shit the whole time. I mean, first off, I don't know that I've been putting him on a pedestal for several years, and I have been critical of stuff like that. I still think there are some decent things he does, and certainly of that crew, I think he's the most useful.
I mean, I don't think anyone is not, everyone isn't just bad or good. I mean, like, there are things I have, like, been so over with Glenn recently, but, like, there are things he's very perceptive on as well, and so I just, like, don't think it's... Plus, I mean, the Operation Car Wash reporting and the NSA reporting, I think, are, like, incredible pieces of journalism that should be lauded, and especially, I mean, both of them took such bravery that I can't even imagine. So, like, that, you deserve credibility, and I'm not gonna, like, be shamed into, like, I saw people were mad that I kind of defended Greenwald in some instances, but, like,
it's okay.
Also, I feel like a lot of the people who were getting mad at us about this are mad for the wrong reasons, right? Like, they're not mad at him because he is extremely online and, like, kind of a bitch to people and needs to log off. They're mad at him for criticizing the liberal establishment, which I am totally fine with.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I think he tweeted about my getting confused about the leadership vote, but the actual point remains. Because, I mean, I suppose I could have, tweeted out that Bree said that Pelosi's not popular with Democrats. Turns out she has anywhere from 50 to 65% popularity amongst Democrats.
And then like 30% want her not to be speaker. And I'm sure half of those Democrats are like, she's too old. And like, that's their politics.
Here's the point. Let's say I can't believe that we're getting this sort of granular with this idea, but... So whatever it is, 5-10 of the progressives say, okay, we're not going to vote for you unless you do the vote. And she says, okay, don't vote for me. Then the progressives have a problem because the longer it goes on, the more popular opinion is going to turn against these progressives if it doesn't start out that way, right? Like, do you think that 60% of the Democrats who support Nancy Pelosi, even if, and we don't really know what AOC's favorability is. I don't know if they've polled that as recently as like 2 months ago. But let's just assume it's at 75%. I don't think it is, but let's assume it is. Do you think that's going to go down when Nancy Pelosi gets on the and says they are holding up all of the COVID relief that we need to do, all of the immediate material benefits that we need to provide for the American public, because they want a vote that everybody in this chamber knows is not going to pass? I mean, in what media universe do we think that this is going to create people to rise up? Remember, we don't believe in organizing, according to Jimmy anyways. But from a comms perspective, I want to know, like, what media outlet is going to go, like, we're going to side with these freshman Congress people.
When they already are, like, completely reviled by a lot of the establishment anyway. They have to expend their political capital wisely.
And they're going to get on and they're going to say, 40,000 people a year die because we don't have Medicare for all, which I think it's a figure from 2009. I don't want to split hairs on this, but because we have about 10 million low-income people who have health care now, Medicaid, because of the ACA, which I'm not endorsing. I'm just trying to lay out some actual numbers that are real. But let's assume it's 45,000. And they're going to turn around and go, like, we've had 100,000 people die in the past month of COVID. And you're going to take 3 or 4 days every day. It's 12,000 people. Now it's 5 days. That's 15,000 people. Now it's 6 days. It's 20,000 people who have died because we can't get stuff out the door. Now, are they going to get it out the door? No, but this is what the argument's going to be. That's what the environment's going to be. And to bet all this and to say that those of us who don't support that tactic, don't support Medicare for all, is the very definition of bad faith.
Well, if I thought that it would move us closer to Medicare for all in a concrete way, I would certainly think that it's a very urgent tactic to carry out and a thing to do. And, on its face, I never said the tactic was a bad idea. I just said, Ryan Grimm and David Sirota convinced me that there were different demands that should be higher on the list, like PAYGO.
That's why.
But also, like, the idea, I think it's sort of a flawed idea. I do think there is some value in showing whatever portion of working class voters still believe that the Democrats are progressive or represent their interests beyond just, staving off the Republicans who are worse. Whatever portion of people still believe that, yes, they need to be disabused of that notion, but knowing is not half the battle. and ideology is not half the battle, right? There were tons of people in exit polls who said they supported Medicare for all, but voted for Joe Biden anyway, which shows you that there's something else going on here. And, the working class as a political category isn't just some sleeping giant that will awaken and do class struggle when you say the right words or when you make the truth clear to people, because people already largely know what's happening. They just don't think that they can do anything about it. And, for the most part, they're right. The left is very weak right now. And the only solution to that, there are no comms shortcuts. You have to organize. You have to build power through working class institutions, through the party, like I've been talking about, through all these things. So, not the worst idea, not the worst thing to make some people realize the Dems aren't on their side, but that's not going to be what does it.
Yeah. The phone's working. Is somebody on the phone right now? Sorry. 608?
608?
Yeah.
Hi, Sam. Tom.
Tom.
I'm calling from the Just Coffee region of South Central Wisconsin.
Nice. I've been there, dude.
Look, I got to change the tone here a little bit. I first need to know what impact Emma's bet on this weekend's NFC Championship game and or whatever fairy dust you were sprinkling on Tom Brady, Sam, that caused him to throw 3 interceptions and still the Packers lost that game. I'm very upset, and I needed an answer about that.
All right. Here's my answer. I had a horrible betting weekend after the divisional round. I was all in on Browns plus 10.5, and that really helped me out last weekend. This weekend, I was all in on the Bills, like a stupid fucking moron, because I thought that they were underplaying Mahomes' turf toe, and that the Bills just had kind of like a real Cinderella thing about them this year. But I was so dumb. I mean, I also bet on the Packers too, because I just, but why do that? Because there's never enough talent surrounding Aaron Rodgers. He will never get accolades that Tom Brady does, even though he's the most talented quarterback to ever play in the sport. It's outrageous what the front office has done to him. And yeah, Tom Brady did throw 3 interceptions, and they were bad interceptions, even though the broadcast decided to fillet him no matter what. So yeah, I guess I'm a bit of a Brady hater. I know he's a top 5 greatest quarterback of all time, whatever. But it is remarkable what he's doing. What was your question, though?
As if I didn't already love the fact that Emma has joined this show, this breakdown was fantastic.
Yeah.
X's and O's. I'd sure like to get Jamie's breakdown of the X's and O's of this, but.
Paul.
No, I was also targeting Sam on this, but let me get off that silliness and just say I want to point people to, and maybe they've seen it already. I want to point people to an article on The Intercept written by Ryan Devereaux, I guess the other Ryan from The Intercept, called "Capitol Attack was a culmination of generations of far-right extremism," and I want Sam to go back and talk about that 2008 report or 2009 report. I think it was April 2009, early days of the Obama administration, where that report came out, I think from DHS, and it got squashed because Republicans said, "Don't be mad at me," basically, and how the tentacles of these things, where we fail to address and stand firm on something that's actually true, and say, no, this is actually happening, and we have to address it. And instead, we crawl in the corner, and if you don't mind my repeating this old phrase, please don't hurt me. That's really what was happening there, and it's kind of sick and sad. I really appreciate the football talk just as a diversion from the other topic.
Yeah.
I will shut up and get off the phone. And
no need to shut up. Appreciate
the call, Tom.
Yeah, eventually I'll pitch my own spin-off where I can rant about this stuff. But God, I've never felt so bad for a professional athlete in my life. I mean, not so bad, but Aaron Rodgers is my favorite player, and just it's criminal what the Packers have done to him. It's just wasted his career. Anyway.
When did someone put the meme of Jamie and I going yeah.
That's, you're talking about football, right?
Yeah. Yes. The ball of the egg.
Jamie, we need to coach you in just empty sports euphemisms so that you can keep the ball in the air.
Oh, well, so to speak. I see what you did there.
Brendan, did you agree with that assessment of mine? You could just keep it short, but.
Yeah, no, I don't really care for Aaron Rodgers. My friend worked on this show, Lip Sync Battle, and he was a PA on the show. It was one of his first gigs in Hollywood. And Olivia Munn threw a fit when she did not have specifically a Bose surround sound system so that she could watch his game when she dated him in the green room. Okay. And I think less of him.
Not progressive king Aaron Rodgers. Good, rare guy with good politics. Rare white guy with good politics in football.
I mean, Brady sucked, but Rodgers had plenty of opportunity.
Okay, the talent gaps in those teams. It's just it's a canyon. They got Devontae Adams, and then I don't even want to.
Oh my God.
Like Mike Evans, Antonio Brown wasn't playing yesterday. And the defenses, there's a massive talent gap. I'm done.
Sounds like a real team of sportsmen who just take the ball and they put it where it needs to go. And I know about sports too.
I went way too long on that. I'm sorry.
You gotta swing if you're gonna.
I know things about the far right. I know things about the other part of that.
Yeah.
But no one seems to want to talk about that.
IAMS, bullying Joe Kennedy. Sam, in your bad faith debate, you made the point that AOC is huge in helping primary Dems. I wanted to add she's also powerful in keeping vulnerable progressives in office. See Ed Markey, indeed. Disco Stew. Now, maybe if your show had more diversity, you'd see the problem with Glenn is that he goes on white nationalist TV every week to agree with Tucker and bash the left. You guys got a real blind spot. Look, I've been critical of him going on Tucker's show many times in the past. I think you have a point with more diversity, but I don't know that we need that to know that about Glenn. I mean, look, it is. I mean, I don't know what else to say.
I've criticized him for all sorts of things. I don't want it to sound like the only thing that I've criticized him for is being a messy bitch online, right? Like he's got some takes that I found very bad on all kinds of topics, including identity politics, the police state in this country, the Black Lives Matter protests, but he's good on some things. So I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple case of work buys you takes. Some people with takes similar to him don't do a lot of work, so I don't really take their takes as seriously.
There you go.
But like a lot of some of his critics I agree with, and some of his critics are kind of just angry liberals who are mad that he's criticizing the Democratic Party, which again I'm fine with.
I think there's truth to that as well.
Real Ace Attorney. I need to know Emma's Super Bowl prediction. Right now, Vegas has the Chiefs by 3.5, but I want the MR sports betting expert take.
Slam the Chiefs.
Criffs from Taiwan. Sam, I watched your debate with Bree, and what struck me the most is how much it would seem like a trivial inside baseball dispute to anyone who hasn't already knee-deep in politics. So it's particularly strange that Force the Vote was widely presented as a which side are you on test. I agree. Emma's Bookie. Never bet on Andrew Cuomo's favorite team. V, hoping DJ Danarchy can remix the Funhouse to add in Emma doing part of the Pokemon rap. That would be good. Simple Socialist. Debt cancellation is a 1,000-year-old concept. Ancient societies understood that the social structure would collapse under too much debt. Ancient Rome almost abolished all debt, private and public. Folks, I meant to say this during the interview, and I don't have the thing, but go back. Graber was on the show talking about debt. I guess it was back in 2011. I didn't realize it was that long ago. Jesus. But yeah, it makes sense, I guess. His book came out in 2011. I think it was early 2012 that he was on the first time. We had him on, I think, at least one other time. But 2012, early 2012. Was that?
We had him on for bullshit jobs in 18, but 12 or it was either 11 or 12 was Occupy, but he also talked about debt.
I know I had him on about the book, and maybe it was just in the context of Occupy as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the moral hazard stuff around debt is ridiculous. Like the reason why debt has ballooned the way that it has in the past few decades, since the 1970s, is not because people just started to be more immoral and less bootstrappy, right? Like obviously there's something else going on here. The capitalist system, in order to keep going in an environment of falling wages and austerity, needs to extend debt to the workers so that they can still afford to buy things. And that's why we're seeing this ballooning of debt.
Zambri, love the camaraderie debate with Bree. Unfortunately, she seemed to break that promise maybe 2 minutes in. I mean, I don't, look, you know, I don't want to overstate this. And so I just...
You're not Michael Tracying like an interaction, you know, like in terms of just
yeah,
like,
she didn't Michael Tracy me like I did to Michael Tracy. But it was just not, and maybe it was my fault for having the wrong expectations. I mean, I'm willing to cop to that as well. I mean, it's, you know,
well, you're just like not as online, so you weren't privy to just like maybe the level of vitriol from that end.
I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
I watched some of it. I thought it was a lively and spirited discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I just presumed at that point, with it being in the rearview mirror, I mean, for me, it was motivated by different things than going there and, you know, saying it was wrong. I mean,
Yeah, I feel like I watched all of it as well, and I'm just surprised. Like, you guys mostly tread over the same sort of question response position over and over again, and it's like, at what point can we just like move past this and understand that like tactically there is a disagreement here?
And you know, if you want to defend Jimmy Dore attacking, you know, the squad that way, then do so. If you don't, then just say so. Like, I mean, it's, you know, frankly, like what I anticipated was like, yes, Jimmy was not helpful in this scenario, but we need to do stuff like this.
But the reality is that it's not just Jimmy.
Well, I mean, there were other people, but he led he was the band leader about that. But
it also was the person you spoke to.
Well, maybe I didn't realize that.
No, it's
Salvador Darty. Hi, MR crew. Former alt-right pipeline victim from Australia here. Shapiro, Milo, etc. Majority Report and Chapo Trap House saved me. Thanks for what you do. If you could please plug my new podcast, Praxis Makes Perfect, at patreon.com. Praxis Make Perfect. We cover politics from Australia, the U.S., and more. Thank you again. All the best from down under. JK, how do you feel about debate with bad faith? Zolatan, what do you think of Bernie Sanders, is running for the governor of Arkansas, the birth of a political dynasty? What? Is this something?
What is that even a reference to?
It's a joke.
But it's a very strange one. Why those elements for that joke?
As opposed to Huckabee, right?
Oh, Huckabee Sanders, Bernie Sanders. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
That's a thinker.
Decoded.
If you have to explain it, real juror. If my wife's and my student debt were canceled, I'd get health care and maybe buy property. Sigh of relief. Is there any concern that by creating free public universities, it might eventually degrade the value of those degrees? It's conceivable that the next Republican administration could cut funding for universities and effectively make a free college degree equivalent to a high school diploma.
But the difference is that you're not guaranteed admission. Like if you have, you know, straight Fs in high school, they're not saying you're guaranteed admission.
That's not.
And it's a problem if you think that the value of a degree is what you paid for it, which is in many cases true. But that's a model we're trying to move away from.
I think the question, I mean, I think there's an element, and they framed it that way, but they could also have easily framed that like, are you worried that under a Donald Trump, those universities will have funding cut and will get degraded? Which, of course, That happens now. It's just the cost is pushed on to, I mean, that's basically what has happened over the years. And the cost is pushed on to the students who go. But here's the thing is that I think that I would hope that what that would do is it would cause people, particularly if it was a universal thing, right, as opposed to a state by state thing, you might start to see a student body that is far more activated because it would have direct implications. I mean, so it's not a question of the value of the degree. It's really more the value of the experience, and the quality of the experience and the education. And I think, I don't know. That's like, it would be like saying, well, what if you, I don't know, increase Social Security and then cut back on it? I mean, people would have to, engage and fight and value it and fight back. I mean, I think that's the way that we're going to have to get it too.
And you should know, just by the failure of past presidents to cut Social Security or privatize it or whatever, universal programs are much harder to roll back.
Exactly. Currency user. Love the interview earlier. Always interested in discussions on debt. Have you ever had Michael Hudson on the show? He wrote a book fairly recently on debt antiquity, but is also an MMT pioneer. I went out to him years and years ago, and I mean, maybe he had a requirement that was not a crazy requirement, but we just didn't have the resources to provide it. He wanted a transcription of the show, and at the time I didn't do it. But I think we could do that. It was weird. I think because he probably has been in situations where he feels like his words are twisted, or in some way, or I don't know. But we should check on that. We should try and get him back on. Real Jimmy Dore. I think AOC is a fraud, but let me take at face value what this Boogaloo boy is telling me.
Oh my God.
No, it's interesting who deserves grace and who doesn't. Also, who deserves to be aggressively challenged or who deserves to be united with in terms of rhetoric, aka Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson on this show completely buys into the framing because, obviously he's on this, very virtuous crusade to get Assange part. Definitely his primary motivation.
Yeah, that one really pissed me off. We don't have to go into it further right now.
I mean, it's highly problematic. And I mean, I think
he's Dave Rubin. He's like, we're watching the Dave Rubin thing, except he's a lot more dangerous and angry. We're watching it now.
I think it's in many respects more problematic than simply Dave Rubin. And that is, there is, I mean, although it's certainly similar function, right?
Yeah.
But I think there is there's a lot of people who have been arguing for a while about, sort of this like Strasser style. There was I was introduced to a new term that.
Oh no.
What's that? What do you call it? Vortex, like the sort of the red-brown.
The red-brown alliance.
Yeah.
I feel like this is often applied in ahistorical ways because the Strasserites were literal Nazis with some socialist positions on things. But we might need a new word to describe what we're talking about, which is a real phenomenon. And it's been fun watching Jimmy Dore independently think that he's inventing it for the first time.
What is this? What are you guys talking about?
Okay, so and Strasser was a literal Nazi, so I don't mean that, but the idea of combining perceiving or having an anti-corporate perspective, and also some nationalistic tendencies.
Steve Bannon.
I mean, there's I'm talking from more from an intellectual thought rather than a literal Nazi. But it leads to
a lot of the European right-wing parties hew closer to this. If you want to talk about France, Marine Le Pen, right? The Front National, is that what her party is called? I'm very tired today. But combining some, social democratic policies for the right people, while still upholding, the capitalist system of exploitation, with a really nationalistic and sometimes racist, depending how it manifests, politics.
I mean, that was what Steve Bannon's vision for politics was, and for the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean, and I think, somebody asked me online, like, why are you, like, a longtime listener asked me, like, why are you spending so much time on this Jimmy thing? And I said, like, Gamergate seemed like an absolutely ludicrous thing to me.
Speaking of Steve Bannon, by the way.
Well, yes.
Yeah.
And Gamergate, I mean, when old Matt was like, Gamergate, I'm like, dude, this is not politics. It's not politics. It's just like, but it's total, like online culture, and it's just dumb. And then, like, 3 years later, they're in the White House, and it's like literally, right? Like literally in the White House. And I just think that, like, I'm well situated to have this as part of our beat. It's not like we don't have, dedicate an hour almost every day to something that's a little bit more sort of like not of the moment or narrow.
Debt,
but
right,
yeah, that's why.
Yeah, and then go Jamie. Yeah,
I gotta say, I got a message. I got like people like to DM me stuff because I got my DMs open. I like to talk to the people. Someone sent me a long message sort of defending the Force the Vote movement against my assertions that there were some reactionary elements mixed up in it. And then I got another message from him last night after I retweeted the Boogaloo Boys thing saying, oh, no, I'm sorry, Jamie, you were right. Like, F Jimmy Dore, he's leaving the door open to this kind of stuff. And which is what happens when you have this kind of vague populist critique of elites without a structural critique of the capitalist system. It can lead to conspiratorial thinking. It can open the door to all kinds of reactionary stuff. But I just want to say about the Boogaloo Boys thing specifically, what I'm saying about it is not that people cannot change, right? I think we need to give people room to change, because that's, if we just have to deal with the way people are right now, we're never going to get anywhere. But the way most people change is through action and through activity and through struggle. Like we had on our guest on the Antifada this week talked about how, there were Northerners, there were Northern whites fighting in the Civil War. There were poor white people going into it who had racist attitudes and were not doing it to free the slaves. And then halfway through, they began singing songs about liberating the slaves, right? People's opinions, people's politics can change over the course of action, and that's what changes them. However, I don't think that that's going to be possible if someone's action in the world is as a member of a right-wing libertarian militia movement.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I saw, I was watching a clip of Jimmy trying to, because apparently what happened too is that he had the Boogaloo Boy on, and then he followed up. He had a guy from the IWWS paper, I think that's what it is, and talking about the longshoremen, not the longshoremen,
the World Socialist website, WSWS.org.
And talking about Hunts Point, which is in New York City. It's a major produce market. And I think we mentioned it the other day, last week, that there was a strike, and
we talked about it on the Fun Half.
The Teamsters had come in and helped out, and
they got a big win over the weekend.
So Jimmy had this guy on to talk about that, and the guy said, like, before we start, I mean, maybe we should pull these clips from tomorrow. He said, before we start, I got to say, like, you can't sit there and platform the Boogaloo Boys. And they got into it because the guy was like, do you know who they are? And blah, blah, blah. And here's the thing. Jamie's point is exactly, people really need to contemplate this, both aspects of it. One, this is what happens when your politics are completely about just establishment and non-establishment, inside and outside, without any type of fundamental sort of like guardrails. I mean, a critique of capitalism, I suppose there's others that you could have, but you need to have some sort of like project other than just the anti-establishment, because you fall into with some wrong people. And it's not like that guy is a bad guy. That guy may be a very nice guy. That guy may be clueless as to what he's a part of. But you do not sell him as a boogaloo boy. You sell him, or you address him as an individual. The whole point of a membership in that group is to promote the group. If you want to save that individual, by all means, that's great. That's exactly what we should be doing. That's exactly what we should be doing. That should be the entire, but if you promote that organization and say they're not so bad, you're not bringing that guy over to our side just for the sake of making this sort of like broad. You're sheepdogging people or funneling people into their worldview. And I got news for you. If it flows that way towards the Boogaloo Boys, bad things start happening. And that was the issue. And I don't know if Jimmy didn't understand this or was backtracking or what, but I'm sorry, like, give me a break. Do some research on these people. We commented on this last week when he just looked at a clip of a guy saying stuff that he agreed with. And he's like, who are these guys? The Boogaloo Boys. And they said, well, I just looked on Wikipedia. They seem to be okay. Like, what? I mean, come on. Jesus.
Not great. And not to put too fine a point on it, but the far left and the far right are critical of the establishment for very different reasons, right? Like right-wing libertarians, far-right fascists, whoever you want to call them, the people who stormed the Capitol. They want to overturn what little democracy we have in this country. And they don't like the state because it stands in the way of private tyranny. Whereas the far left, communists and anarchists, we don't like the state. We don't like the establishment to the degree that it upholds hierarchy and exploitation and puts a damper on democracy, because we want to expand democracy to the realm of the economic. We want full democracy. So, to say that these people have anything in common is really a stretch.
I mean, what do you think happens? We said this the other day. What do you think happens when they overthrow the government with their weapons?
Well, I mean, even like their policy they're agitating for now, which is the reopen stuff. It's not like the workers are going to decide, it's the bosses that are deciding to reopen it and come to work and get sick for people for my profit. That's what they want.
Yep. Heretical Christian. Sam, can we please stop worrying about whether a prominent personality supports aligning with white nationalists and worry about the more important issues about what constitutes yelling? If you spend most of your time criticizing progressives in Congress and platforming fascists, you're probably on your way to becoming a fascist. Kid tested. You could argue that Trump has his own Mangino line. Great coach, large man, not very mobile. Looking forward to the April Fool's show where Ken and Kennedy argue over why an immediate House vote to storm the Capitol is needed. Vitriolic discussion occurs when Sean Hannity calls in to tell you all to be patient. That's actually pretty funny. Amy Jean, Emma, we've been at Ray's sense of anxiety. It's going to take a while for this to dissipate.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. JJ Cool, I think you need to get a bigger notepad, especially when you're in discussions with so-called allies that are focused on pedantry and loaded questions. Dr. Chaos, MD. The Oregon legislature is holding an informational hearing today and a public hearing on Wednesday regarding two police reform bills. HB 2931, and arresting officers responsible for ensuring the person they arrested receives medical attention. That's good, seems to me, if they need it. And HB 2932, establish a public database of reports of use of physical force by cops in corrections. That should be a federal requirement. We should that should be a federal requirement, and there should be a massive penalty if these things are not entered. I mean, just as a baseline, it's sort of just absurd that we don't know that. with the force the vote debate with Brianna, and I admit I didn't make it through the entire debate video. I cannot say I blame you. Was it ever addressed that force the vote failed and Medicare for All did not receive a vote? No. And if that crowd has plans to do anything differently next time, no. That, in retrospect, that was what I had thought we were going to be talking about, and I should have just entered in.
My favorite part from the clip, by the way, was that she conflating the national disapproval numbers for Nancy Pelosi with what normie Democrats, the voters that are trying to be targeted in these primary elections, ostensibly with force the vote. But sorry, I had to just put that out there. Just like nonsensical.
Look, you know, you know, in the exchange that I had presumed was going to happen, you know, stuff like that, it just doesn't seem like, you know, I just presumed it was going to be more like, you know, when we have conversations with stuff that we disagree with. But Senator Schumer's only fan. I swear to God, every other week, a left-aligned, overly online clown tries to form some sort of red-brown alliance. Just stop. Also, please let Jamie on Wednesdays and Fridays. Would you recommend checking out the Ulsterholm Update COVID-19? It's Ulsterholm's podcast. In his call last week, one was due to the variants. He expects things to get worse. Yes, well, I think that's the case. His podcast this week goes over possible responses. We should try and just get him on. Banada. If Dems really had teeth, they would make Mar-a-Lago, the state cemetery for COVID deaths, like the union made Robert E. Lee's house at Arlington Cemetery. Radical Cedars Party. Sam, I liked your debate on Friday with Bree. I don't think she realized Nancy Pelosi is still fairly popular among normie Democrats. Is this from you, Emma?
Yeah, I've been IMing into the show.
Including members of Congress came in during the 2018 wave. I worked for a congressional candidate in 2018 who said publicly she would stand up to Nancy Pelosi if she was elected, but behind the scenes she was a total fangirl. If a vote for speaker went 12 rounds or whatever she had in her mind, everyone who was a potential ally to the squad would instead resent the squad, and the squad's relational power would be severely diminished. I mean, look, that's my perspective. The point is that we don't know. And that scenario seems to me just as likely, if not more likely, than the opposite. That there would be this rising up of people about Medicare for all because we're in a pandemic. I also think it is dangerous to peg Medicare for all with our need for it because we're in a pandemic. Because the bottom line is, like I say, we have lost 400 and some odd thousand, 420, almost 20,000 people now. And so, and it's not because we don't have Medicare for all. Would Medicare for all, if it was pre-existing prior to the pandemic, have made things a little bit better? Arguably. I mean, it would, in terms of the pandemic, arguably, right? You could argue that there might be, sort of a flatter supply of ICU beds as opposed to sort of like coordinated in wealthier hospitals. You could argue that there might not be the disparity between public hospitals and private hospitals that we have. I think that's possible.
People wouldn't be afraid to go to the doctor because they don't have enough money.
People would be more inclined to go to the doctor. But the fact of the matter is that the reason why we're having this many deaths, and you can compare these numbers in Europe, is a function of the fact that we had a federal government that was pursuing a herd immunity policy. And so, like, the numbers that we're dealing with are a function of we didn't have the type of lockdowns. Look, if you want to talk about how you address this, it should be you would do it on the unemployment side and you would do it on the employment side. You would have the government paying employers to pay or pay the employees. The government's going to pay you your salary, and your job is going to be stay at home. And then the business owner, they're going to present to us what their fixed costs are, and we're going to pay off those fixed costs, and we're going to give a markup so that they can get a salary too, and that's what we're going to do. That, you want to talk about like how you would address the COVID. That's how you do it. But if you start making Medicare for all about the pandemic, what are we going to do next year at this time when the pandemic dies down? What's the argument going to be then? The argument for Medicare for all is to create more durability in our society and to make sure that everybody gets health care, period.
I mean, the amount of fatigue that people would have about bringing Medicare for all into this issue in terms of messaging, I think can't be understated too. So, like the immediate things on people's mind are getting COVID relief and vaccine distribution, and like that's where the messaging needs to be directed.
And there's no doubt there's no doubt we'd have more rationality to our medical system if we had Medicare for all.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think Jamie's point about how more people would be willing to go see a doctor if they had symptoms, that also would help. So I don't think Medicare for all would be negligible in terms of combating the pandemic.
And it does seem like a good time to kind of hammer on that point, right? Like, I think there are people who, to be fair, they always wanted Medicare for all. But especially now when everyone's so concerned about their health, this seems like a good time to get that message out. But it needs to be a holistic approach as well, right? Like quarantining costs money, like we've been saying, pay people to stay home. But also all of these pre-existing problems have made the pandemic worse, like housing insecurity. People are cramming a ton of people into one apartment or a homeless shelter. It spreads faster in those conditions. And there's all different components to health and to safety. And I don't see the Biden administration doing enough to address those underlying issues.
Yeah, Jamie, on that point, there was this tweet here I want to share. I believe this is it. From Lydia DePhillis, a study finds that uniform moratoria on evictions and utility shutoffs through November of last year could have saved 164,000 lives lost to COVID if real, and make reducing housing precarity easily the best public health measure we got. So yeah, there's a lot of different health measures like these. I mean, all this systemic rot we can identify as related.
Right. I mean, without a doubt. I think that's the way you make the case. But just to presume that people are number one thought during this pandemic is the lack of Medicare for all, and that's why they're going to rise up. I mean, I'm bringing this up in the context of the theory that they had relied dramatically on this. And I would say, actually, no. On January 4th, the thing that people are going to be thinking is not, are we going to rise up because these people are holding the House hostage and not allowing it to move forward because of Medicare for all? It's like, we want vaccines. We want testing. We want vaccines. We want extension on unemployment. We want a $2,000 check. There's a long laundry list of things that I think people are going to motivate for more at this moment than the idea of what will invariably be, regardless of who it is that shepherds it through, a 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 year process once we can get people to vote in favor of it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if everybody's thinking about it in quite so linear a way. I do think there's some real PR potential. Just the utter depravity of not pushing Medicare for all in a pandemic is very, very bad. But, again, that falls on Biden and the establishment and not on the squad.
Right.
To Zuckerberg, I share your concern about a Nazball vortex. That's what it is.
National Bolshevism.
Nazball.
I mean, we don't really have the bowl part. Let's not flatter Jimmy Dore and say that he's in any way a Bolshevik.
Right. But it could be a Nazball. I mean, nothing's ever exactly the same, right?
Like a Nazlib.
Calling from a 208 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Sean from Washington.
Sean from Washington, what's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to call in and talk a little bit about some of the things going on in schools, specifically in Washington. But in waiting, I just got a couple of things I want to bring up really quick. First off, Aaron Rodgers is terrible. He pouts in his press conferences. He's a poor loser. He pushes cameras out of the way. Cam Newton put a towel over his head and got drugged for years about being a poor leader, and Aaron Rodgers gets to blame his teammates. He gets to do all this. He's terrible. I'm not taking questions on it.
Yeah, the media is racist about Cam Newton. Like, you're not going to get an argument.
In Tacoma right now, there's some pretty interesting stuff happening right now.
Aaron Rodgers.
No. It's terrible.
This is like an episode of Bad Faith. I'm joking. Go ahead. Go. This is all bad faith. In Tacoma right now, I'm just encouraging people to check out what we got going on out here. Just 2 days ago, the police department that murdered Emmanuel Ellis ran over a man in a crowd after trying to break up some street racing. They weren't actually racing. They were just doing donuts and showing off little car club that they've been... Local Tacoma police have been treating this car club with kid gloves for months and months and months, and then now all of a sudden they have to go, run over a man. And, they're claiming the typical stuff. The crowd went around the cop car and started banging on it and stuff, so he had no choice. But from people there, videos, tons of videos, there was plenty of place for the car to back out, and then he just floored it through a crowd of people and then continued to speed off down the street after, double axle running over a guy. We have video of that. We'll play that.
Oh, okay. And I was going to say, Rebecca Parson was a congressional candidate out here. You might be familiar with her. She does a lot of great work with a lot of mutual aid organizations that I work with out here in Tacoma, and she's been sort of active on that. I think she'd be a great guest for the show if anybody wants to reach out to Rebecca Parson.
Send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com and just remind her, put her name in the subject line.
Okay, I'll do so. And then just the last bit, I don't want to take up any more time, but for the last bit, please, it would be great to see a little bit of coverage on what's going on with school districts and unions voting, starting to spread all around the country about returning to Chicago did it, Bellevue right now here just outside of Seattle. Bellevue teachers, they actually sent kids back to the building without the teachers being there.
That's actually what's happening at my daughter's school. My daughter's been remote. We chose remote. Well, she was like there are going to be kids who aren't going to wear masks. I'm not going. And then what they did is they ended up having the kids come in and sit in the classroom, and the teachers beam in through Zoom.
Yeah, that's clearly much more effective and well thought out. I'm glad,
Yeah, I mean, at least it provides kids who don't have the resources at home, like a place where they can go and theoretically have access to the teachers. It is what it is. But all right, appreciate the call.
Thanks a lot.
Shoot. There we go. I'm trying to get on this. My thing is just absolutely freaking out. What is going on here? Bear with me, folks. Technical. All right, we got time for one more call. If I can get this call screen to come back up. Calling from a 509 area code.
Sam.
Okay. Well, all right. What's
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan. What is happening?
Well, I'm kind of embarrassed to have to do this. I don't want to drag you, as the kids say, but
find that hard to believe.
You're aware that Joe Biden won the election, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, because I tuned into my favorite show, The Majority Report, on Friday. I'm thinking things are back to normal, and no Cliff Schecter. I'm just thinking, okay, this is fine. There's going to be a Jimmy Reefer Cake song at least, right? So I'm waiting for a song about freedom and weed, and I don't get that. So then I'm thinking, okay, fine so far. At least Isabel Gillies will be here to talk about her new book, Fuzzy. It's about things in her life that are fuzzy, like baby ducks and things like that.
Right.
And no, so like, that things are now back to normal, right?
Right. Well, it's going to take a little time. I mean, you gotta.
Okay.
You gotta have a. You gotta give it a little time. But no, I appreciate the. I appreciate that. But I want
to say one more thing.
Yeah.
I want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
I listened to your debate with the bad faith folks, and I like a good debate. People on the left shouldn't be afraid to argue, and Bree brought
Sam's
a lot
not
of
afraid to argue, right?
No, I'm not afraid to argue.
Bree, Bree brought forth a lot of really clear ideas, and you brought forth your personal hatred of Jimmy Dore, which irrationally motivates you at all times, and it's just people sharing ideas, like that you, for example, don't really care that much about Medicare for all and don't think that it would help people that much. And insofar as people are dying, that's not outweighed by your hatred of Jimmy Dore. I mean, these are just ideas being kicked around.
Right.
And so it was good. It was productive. I felt like.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I mean, I knew that. That was one of the big major factors I went on was because of you and my personal hatred of Jimmy Dore.
Right. Okay, cool.
Speaking of the old days.
Oh, I miss that song.
You too. Yeah, see, I knew. All right.
Libertas LLC, new media, public relations, and strategy.
All right. Yeah.
All
right, one more call. 847. You've been holding on for 97 minutes.
Wow.
Hi, Sam. It's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago, you are the final caller of the day.
I won't get into a debate about Aaron Rodgers and how he not very good in these championship games, but
no talent around him. That's the difference. Yep.
Mask off on the Majority Report audience. It turns out to be a lot more football players.
I'm shocked I'm shocked that someone from Chicago is going after Aaron Rodgers, since he's completely owned your franchise for the past how many years?
All right, we got to wrap up. It's 2:45.
Yeah.
My God.
Sorry.
Anyways, no, I think Jamie is 100% right. I think the danger of having these critiques of I'm angry at the establishment, man, without actually talking about the structures of capitalism and the structures of the ruling class is at best you get Bree and Virgil's sort of critiques, but at worst you get not only Jimmy Dore, but you get the Hill Rising, which really if they're against the establishment, then they're good. And, you get then, defenses of people like Josh Hawley, defenses of, other right-wing bad actors. And I think the problem is that these shows are taking advantage of people who are very angry.
Yeah.
And it's really, really dangerous when these structural critiques don't exist.
Good.
Yeah. And they also lack an analysis of how nationalism, xenophobia, and racism operate, especially in this country, to keep the class hierarchy in place.
That is the last word of the day. Josh, appreciate the phone call. I'm sorry, guys. I gotta get going. It's 2:45, and I've got.
I had another point, but whatever.
I'm sorry. Three more IMs, then we gotta get out of here. Chanderson, now that Biden's in office, can we take a moment to talk shit on Beto O'Rourke? Instead of continuing his campaign after losing to Ted Cruz and attempting to beat Cornyn, he decided to run for president and turns back on my state. To add that, showing up in Dallas on Bloody Monday and then backing Biden. All right. Well,
I remember.
A little late, but yeah, Jamie does. Winnipeg Craig, one thing that's important to understand about Jimmy Dore, he thinks Boogaloo Boys are gettable allies for the left, but spent the previous weeks attacking DSA, Nurses Union, the Squad, and Bernie. Indeed. And the final IM of the day, very appropriate, MSNB Seder. I felt exhausted by your convo with Bria. The time for the tactic had passed, and Pelosi had already won the speakership. It was 3 hours of hypotheticals as to why you didn't support FTV forcefully. Also, I think it's fair to criticize a movement based on association with a leader whose intentions seem obviously dubious. Matt, Brendan, Emma, Jamie, good job today. See you guys tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know get there.